Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Has a Broken Dojutsu. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The life of a shinobi, it was an empty life cycle characterized by constant emotional pain as the assassin gave his being for his state, a tool that lasted only until they were dulled and useless. There was no emotion, no crying for fallen comrades, there was nothing beyond the mission. And once broken, they were discarded like trash. Naruto didn't get that, so Haku thought it was his job to explain it to him. It was a cruel irony. And Haku's heart was as weak as ice. He couldn't stand the thought of killing someone he could have called friend. But any weakness meant the weapon was worn out. Zabuza didn't need tools that were broken. You're only worth your use. Those are his words. Anything was better than feeling hopeless and alone. Is this the first time you've lost a comrade? The question was asked by Haku from inside an ice mirror. No answer from Naruto. Instead, he kept looking down at Sasuke's dead body, confused and saddened by the death of the last Uchiha of Konohagakure no Sado. Why? He asked in a shaky voice, hoping that his friend who was being quiet could answer. Haku said, he was a shinobi worthy of honor. He sacrificed his life for you. I didn't deserve it, Naruto whispered, his golden bangs covering his hurt eyes. When Naruto looked into Sasuke's closed eyes, he felt empty. Sasuke gave up his life for him. What was so important about him that the Kyuubi hated him so much? That's not right. How could he throw everything away? He gave up his dream so that he could save a friend. It was not fair. Even though Naruto shed cold tears, he didn't care that the comforting warmth wasn't there. Haku's feelings were boiling over, and he felt bad for doing something so wrong. But he kept his feelings inside. This had to be done. Zabuza's dream was still a long way off. He then held a few senbon in his hands, getting ready to kill his enemy and his own heart. He moved out of the mirror slowly. The fake hunter. Nin saw a sparkle in her eye. He stopped moving forward and watched as a drop of something like mercury or silver fell on the Uchiha's shirt. As Haku followed the path, he looked up and saw two trails of the shiny liquid falling from Naruto's dark eyes. What? Naruto cut Haku off, and a strange, guttural growl came from his throat. Shut up. He said, something's wrong. After years of being on the run, instincts told them that everything was going to hell. It began slowly. As if a drop of rain hit the ground before a storm. But then the dam broke, letting a wave of killer intent flood the dome of mirrors and scare Haku back into his ice structure. It would have been too dangerous for Haku to stand without his mirror. His anger and desire to kill would have worn even Zabuza out. I'll kill you. Naruto yelled and raised his head. Naruto's cerulean irises broke like a rock hitting a mirror. The color changed right away to reflective silver as cracks appeared in his silvery pupils that had not been damaged. What the hell is this? Zabuza asked out loud. Kakashi could be. It's not his, it's too strong. A wave of unpleasant anger swept across the bridge, suffocating everyone in its path. Soon after, foul chakra came along and made the atmosphere even worse. Is that Zabuza? The real answer hit Kakashi like an S. Rank jutsu when he asked it. Shit. It's not possible. Did it break the seal? Hatake was curious. In short, he kept thinking about a picture of Konoha on fire, which was a memory of a terrible event that happened 12 years ago. Even though it had been 12 years, he could still remember the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha like it was yesterday. Every word the Sandaime had told him about his sensei's death would sometimes come back to him. He begged any god who would listen that Naruto was still in charge. He stretched his senses and barely let himself relax. He had to stay alert because an enemy Jonin was still stalking the mists. Not at all, it's fine. Naruto's spirit is still whole. Kakashi looked at it. But there's no doubt about it, that chakra is it. I need to end this. The battle had to end, even if it was just to make sure everything was okay. It looked like Naruto was letting out that chakra. That didn't mean much, though. Naruto was a Jinchuriki after all, and there was a good reason why they were dangerous. Listen, Zabuza. I'm a little short on time, Kakashi said, hoping Zabuza would fall for it. I understand it's not your style, but how about we end the fun? He let out a breath he hadn't been aware he was holding as Zabuza's voice echoed through the fog. Show me what you've got, copy. Cat. Good, Kakashi said, hoping that small talk would take his mind off of his student, who was being a real pain. I see you're as eager as I am to finish this. If only because I didn't know you had a little monster like that with you, replied Zabuza. When Kakashi took a scroll out of his vest, he threw it into the air and cut his thumb on it. The scroll came back into Kakashi's hands when gravity grabbed it. He unfolded it and ran his bloody thumb across it. As a joke, Kakashi told him, now, don't insult my student. When Kakashi flashed through a set of hand seals, the scroll quickly rolled itself up. Kachiyose. Doten. Suiga no Jutsu. As soon as the anger hit Sakura, she knew something was very wrong. The pinkette doubled over to dry heave because she wasn't used to projecting such strong feelings. When she turned to look at Tizuna, she saw the bridge builder faring with her. The old man, who was on his knees, looked just as sick as Sakura. He choked out, "WW, what's going on?" Sakura did nothing but whine. He could feel it, and he wasn't even a ninja. What was going on? Were Naruto and Sasuke-kun okay? Or was that fake hunter Nin to blame? There were so many questions, and each one made her more nervous. Even knowing that this wasn't normal for shinobi didn't make Tizuna feel better. Haku and Naruto looked at each other for a very short time. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't look at the happy blonde, but at the sadness in his own eyes. When he looked into his enemy's eye and saw himself, it both confused and scared him. Haku thought about just one thing: what kind of monster have I woken up? Naruto's crimson chakra exploded, shooting into the air in a spiraling stream that tore through the cement as it went around its host. When the power went out, a huge gust of wind blew away the mists and made the picture clear. Even scarier, the foul chakra temporarily turned into the head of a beast, staring down at Haku like a predator watching its prey. How is this possible? Haku asked, his fear and panic spreading through him like wildfire through the brush. Chakra can't be seen with the naked eye. And it smells so bad. Something scary must have chakra in this. The chakra went back into Naruto, but the anger and desire to kill did not go away. As soon as the bad energy came back into Uzumaki, he slowly stood up and changed. His hair got messier, his nails got longer and sharper, and his birthmarks got clearer. The dozens of needles that were piercing him could be felt as smoke rose from the wounds that were healing. Haku tensed up when Naruto looked at himself in the mirror. He is coming at you. Naruto smashed through the ice mirror like it was paper with an out of character burst of speed. His alien eyes sent out a trail of silver light. But Haku was even a little faster. He was able to jump into another mirror just as the attack hit. Soon after, Naruto blasted through the mirror dome from the other end and destroyed the safe haven, scattering frozen ice all over the place. Haku almost died when his body shot out of a piece of glass and into another mirror. Such strength, Haku muttered as he took quick, heavy breaths. And the killer's plan. The last member of the Yuki family couldn't find the right words to describe how intense it was. But there was also that strange Kekkei Genkai. What was it able to do? What did it do? Why didn't Naruto use it? And there were no answers to any of the questions. It was like a wild card that tipped the scales in Naruto's favor, but no one knew how it worked. That's why this fight had to end right now. With a flash of his mirrors, Haku tried to hit the Jinchuriki with many senbon. But it was for nothing because a second later Naruto roared and sent out a shockwave that threw off the needles that were piercing him and broke the mirrors. What are you? It was getting scary, so Haku asked. He stopped my attack with pure chakra. There was a split second when their eyes locked and a stormy gray met the silver. Then, something strange happened. The flakes that came out of Naruto's eyes caught the sun as they fell to the ground and disappeared, like broken mirror glass falling out of its frame. Under the silvery shards was the red of a young Sharingan, with one Tomo on the right and two on the left, but the reflective pupil was still there. This is not possible. Haku screamed in his head. There was only one thing that could mean such a sight. For Haku, just the thought sent chills up his spine. He wouldn't give up though. Not as long as he did what his master told him to do. Haku gathered his strength and jumped toward another mirror to get ready for a counterattack. Suddenly, he was pulled back as his ankle was snatched from midair. Naruto swung Haku over his shoulder and into the concrete in less than a quarter of a second. Haku had just enough time to look down at his opponent's red eyes. The fake hunter. Nin gasped as his ribs cracked and air left his lungs. He was right. The fake Sharingan worked just as well as the real one. Just a second of peace before Naruto swung Hack back over and hit the taller boy hard on the back, breaking the concrete as it did so. When Haku felt several of his vertebrae crack, he let out a sharp gasp that sent pain all over his body. When Uzumaki roared and swung his opponent into the air, he sent Haku into an ice mirror by accident. Naruto jumped after his prey, upset that he had lost it, and he broke the mirror, but Haku jumped out just in time. The angry Jinchuriki tried to follow after seeing the movement with the fake Sharingan, but Haku flashed his mirrors and stopped him. Shit, Haku muttered as he stood up slowly. His taste buds were filled with the taste of blood. His broken ribs made it hard to breathe. And his cracked vertebrae limited his movement but didn't stop him. It just hurt. Naruto wouldn't let him off the hook, though. The younger boy broke through the ice, leaving a trail of red light behind him. Haku retaliated by shooting out of a shard and down at Naruto, but the blonde jumped out of the way in a spiral in the air. Naruto pushed off the ground with heavy chakra as his toes touched the cold ground. His claws were pulled back for a devastating strike. Oh no, I can't run away. Even a light blow would be enough to hurt Haku if he turned his back on this. Haku made a hand seal and swung an arm to block the attack. An ice blade stuck out from his wrist. This is Hyoten's Hyoshokan no Jutsu. Haku yelled in his head. Swords and claws locked horns, but Naruto charged, putting the tips of his nails just an inch from Haku's face. What Zabuza's partner did, though, was use chakra to dig his feet into the ground. Naruto's attack was so strong that it almost broke his ankles. Haku pushed back with what little strength he still had at the bottom of the well. Naruto pushed into the blade, not caring that it cut his hand, and his eyes moved. The Sharingan stopped spinning and broke into pieces, looking pale until those broken, reflective eyes came back. For the third time, Haku was curious about what this Kekkei Genkei could really do. In a second, though, he would feel bad about that thought when the shards fell apart again, this time revealing stormy gray. His very own eyes. In the blink of an eye, frost formed on Naruto's fingers, and then water in the air condensed into claw. Like icicles. They grew so quickly that Haku had to jump to avoid getting stabbed. But running away was a bad idea because Naruto suddenly flared his chakra, scattering the mists, and jumped after them, getting past Haku's guard. The older boy avoided the first ice claw stab and only got a few cuts on his mask. But he then got a left hook that was filled with obscene chakra and sent him flying through one of his diamond hard mirrors and across the ground like a rock on water. As the boy slowly stood up, his mask slowly fell apart. Looking at his enemy, he saw his last few mirrors fall apart because they were no longer receiving chakra. The demon boy looked at him with eyes that looked like they were ready to kill, and his body was hidden by the light behind him. What about Zabuza? Haku felt hopeless and thought, I can't beat this boy. I am. As Naruto charged at him, his ice claws dug into the ground and raked the concrete as he dragged his weapons behind him. A piece of Haku's mask fell off, and he closed his eyes to wait for death. The wind changed so fast that Sakura almost got whiplash. She thought she was going to die from all the killer intent 1 second, and then she felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off her shoulders the next. She actually fell because the change was so big. Holy shit, what was that? Tizuna was about to yell. Do you know you're a shinobi? What was that? No, Sakura answered with trembling. I've never felt anything like that. No matter what it was, Sakura hoped she would never see it for herself. When Haku slowly opened his eyes, he saw Naruto's ice claws break apart and fall to the ground, leaving his hand a foot away from his forehead. The pain had gone away. When he looked at the blonde's face, his messy hair blocked his eyes, but tears were still running down his face. Why? You're from that time, Naruto made a noise. Why did you stop? Haku had a question. I killed your buddy. Then why not kill me? He was hit with a left uppercut by Haku, which knocked him out. Even though it wasn't as bad as the last hit, it was enough to knock out a few teeth. After lying on the ground for a moment, he rasped, "You're going against everything you were taught as a shinobi." The blonde yelled, "I don't care." Haku slowly stood up, spitting blood out of his mouth. When he looked into Naruto's eyes, he could see that the irises were back to looking like a broken mirror. Haku was shocked when the pieces of mirror that made up the irises fell off again, showing the crystal. Blue Naruto was linked to. The pupils still had the reflective surface though. You have a Kekkei Genkai. Like me, Haku said as he stood up straight. Naruto shook his head and the silver tears flew all over the place. "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. But you used my Hyuten in the Uchiha's Sharingan," Haku replied. "What?" the blonde asked in shock. "I'm not a Uchiha. Or related to. I guess you two have little understanding of what you're capable of," Haku said. "It'd be more accurate to say you copied our abilities." He didn't say anything. "Is that even possible?" Haku smiled in a sad way. "Neither do I. It's tough to believe what you're capable of. Really, though, your eyes are pretty, if a little scary." "Thank you. I guess so." Naruto found it hard to deal with what was going on, even just because there was so much to think about. He used the Kyuubi's chakra, killed Sasuke, and then all of a sudden he was told he had a Kekkei Genkai. He didn't understand why he was being praised for his eyes though. Any other person would have been gagging from having too much to think about. He could worry about his own problems later, though. The fight wasn't over yet, but his enemy stood in front of him, hurt. Haku was scared about what was going to happen, but it had to happen. "But you should still kill me. Like a true shinobi, you should do it. A lot of people make the mistake of letting their enemy go with just their lives." Naruto felt angry and his face turned red. "Screw that. But can't you understand that pain, of being alone, unneeded, not having a dream, the pain of simply being alone?" Naruto took a nervous step back as Haku so easily called his heart's deepest scar. "What do you want to say?" The blonde fell out. The blood dripping from Haku's lips made him smile in a painful way. "Zabuza doesn't need a weak shinobi. You've taken away my reason to live." Once more, anger came to the surface. "Why? What kind of service is that for a jerk? Why is he the only important person to you?" The fake ninja sighed. "You know, I used to be close to other people. These are my parents." Haku sighed and told the story of his life. He said that his father was afraid of him and his mother and tried to kill him, but he killed himself instead. He then talked about how he had been nothing but an orphan and had been wandering the land until Zabuza found him and trained him. Naruto didn't say anything as he thought about how they were so much alike. The blonde finally said, "Maybe we could have been friends if things had been different." Haku smiled in a soft way. "Perhaps we could have been. Before I ask you for a favor. The power you used on your eyes. What is it?" Naruto was suddenly reminded of the problems he was having. "No, I don't. I'm not sure. How could I get one?" "Look at your tears," Haku told her with a soft smile on his face. The blonde did what he was asked and wiped a tear off his cheek. He saw what looked like mercury or even liquid silver when he held the droplet up to his face. He ran his fingers through the fluid to see what it was. It was cold, but the liquid was smooth and almost pleasant to touch. He turned around and looked back at Haku, who still had a sad face. He couldn't help but think about who his parents were for the second time in his life. He must have a clan if he had Kekkei Genkai, right? "Your eyes, they're very beautiful." Before he could get too deep into his thoughts, Haku's compliment brought him back to the present. "Thanks," Naruto said slowly. He would believe Haku because he couldn't see them right now. "About that favor. When this is all over, I'll have a scroll with all the tricks I came up with at our hideout." The older boy said, "It's about a mile outside of town." "What's this favor?" When the Jinchuriki asked, they were being careful, because ninja didn't just hand over scrolls with useful techniques for no reason. The only thing that scared Naruto was Haku's sad smile. "I want you to kill me." The blonde turned pale and quickly replied, "No way. I'm not going to do it." He almost begged, "Please," Haku said. "I don't want to live. I am just a broken tool, and Zabuza doesn't need something that can't help him." Naruto tried to change the boy's mind by saying, There has to be another way." Haku wouldn't say no. I wish there was a different way. I'm sorry you have to touch my blood. Is this the only way? Asked the blonde with whiskers. The answer, yes, was clear. Naruto twirled a kunai out of his pouch and grabbed it, shedding silver tears. He closed his eyes as he charged at the happy boy, but when he opened them, Haku was stopping him with a senbon while doing a single half-seal. That's what he was supposed to do. Excuse me, but my master needs me for one more thing. If I could make one last wish, it would be for those beautiful eyes of yours to stay safe. With that, he went into his ice mirror and ran away. Haku was no longer alive when he was finally seen again. Gato was killed by Zabuza with a kunai held between his teeth. Gato's arms were useless because they were hurt in the fight with Kakashi Hatake earlier. In the end, Zabuza's life was forfeit to the Shinigami when the hired guns returned fire and stabbed him with a wide range of weapons. After that, the small army of men turned their attention to Team 7, but the villagers, led by Inari, got there on time. Naruto stayed out of sight from the crowds and his teammates while the villagers were happy. He looked into a puddle of water and examined his eyes while everyone else laughed and cheered. His irises stayed the clear blue color he was used to, but his pupils stayed the mirror shapes they changed into. When Naruto put chakra into his irises broke and turned white like broken mirrors. Seeing himself in his eyes was kind of funny, but only in a hollow way. When he cut off the chakra, the pieces of mirror in his irises fell out, revealing cerulean below. My last wish is that your beautiful eyes stay safe. He kept hearing Haku's last request over and over in his head. Naruto looked over his shoulder and saw Sakura helping Sasuke as they both told stories about the battle. Sasuke looked like he wanted to be somewhere else, maybe sleeping in a bed? When he looked away, he saw that his teacher was also being hounded by a group of villagers. His face was hidden by his famous orange book, though. Good. His eyes were only known to the dead. Naruto's eyes opened his eyes to the fact that he wasn't just a nobody, even if he was a nobody with a demon bound to his gut. He really wanted to tell everyone about it. So he could show off his cool eyes and brag that he wasn't just an orphan anymore. He also wanted to show the ninja world that he had the genes to become Hokage. But Haku's last and only request kept his ego in check like a chain keeps a dog from running away. He thought as he looked up at the sky and watched the sun go down. He knew how valuable a Kekkei Genkai that copied others was, even though he was at the very bottom of his class. Shinobi saw it as the same thing as a priceless treasure. For that reason, what was stopping someone from taking his eyes out? Naruto looked away from the evening palette and at his reflection in the puddle of water. He looked at his silvery pupils again. He promised Haku, "I'll look after these eyes." The world of ninjas would never be the same after that oath. As they made their way back to Tezuna's house, Naruto stayed away from his team so they wouldn't be able to see his sparkling, mirror-like pupils. To make sure they wouldn't see his eyes, he even walked more slowly. His pupils would sometimes shine in the moonlight, which made it hard to hide his new double. Thanks to their porn, none of them had paid any attention, not even Kakashi, who had his nose deep in his book. With a sneer, Sasuke looked back at Naruto and narrowed his eyes. He then put his hands behind his head and pretended to be stupid. Unfortunately, the Uchiha had to ask his teammate with the pink hair to help him walk back. He would have picked the Dobi over her, but Naruto was a royal jerk and said he didn't want to. As you might expect, Sasuke wasn't feeling well. "Why the hell are you moving so slow?" "I'm the one who was almost killed," the Uchiha said with a snort. He replied, "Why does it matter to you, you ungrateful jerk? I saved your behind when you were turned into a human pincushion." He narrowed his eyes even more so that the people who were now looking at him couldn't see his pupils. Sakura turned her attention to him with a mad face while still helping her crush. "Naruto, be polite. Sasuke has had it rough." "Well, at least one good thing came out of this. Sasuke got thumped, the blonde with the sun. Kissed skin said with a smile. He added in his mind, "Not to mention this cool Dojutsu I got during the fight. I wish I knew how to make it work." Before things got out of hand, Kakashi looked up from his sexy orange book and added his 2 cents to the exchange. Now you guys. The time for arguing should be saved for a later date. Right now we're tired and we need a good night's rest." There was going to be no argument. There were better times, and right now, sleep did sound like a great idea. Sasuke let out one last annoyed snort and then quickly turned back to the road, leaving their blonde teammate to think again. After letting out a sigh, Naruto knew he would not be able to sleep tonight. Someone he lost could have been a close friend but for some reason wasn't. He saw it as a time to mourn, not to celebrate. When the living storm saw the lights of Tizuna's house, he looked up and started moving more slowly. He stopped completely at the edge of the lights. So far, he wasn't sure if his eyes would show if he walked into the glowing house, and he didn't feel like taking a chance right now. Kakashi turned around and saw his most unpredictable student suddenly stop as they walked into the house, making sure they were far enough away from the lights to be safe. The Scarecrow wasn't sure if he was seeing things or not, but he was sure Naruto's eyes were shining. He shook his head quickly to make sure it wasn't a dream, but Naruto closed his eyes before he could see it again. He asked, "Are you coming?" Naruto answered the question with a solemn voice and as narrowed eyes as possible. He didn't mean to say that, but it just came out. "No, I think I'm going to stay out here a bit and think about things." This tone of voice caught Kakashi off guard, and he just stared at him for a minute. The blonde who was always on the go didn't usually talk in a sad way, so it was strange to hear that voice come from him. "Is there something you'd like to talk about?" The former Anbu captain asked, his voice filled with worry. That was Naruto's first battle, so he told Kakashi, "Don't worry. It was just my first battle and I kind of need to sort things out a bit." The man with silver hair looked at him with one eye open for what seemed like minutes. Then he finally nodded. Naruto kept a smile on his face as he watched his sensei come into the house. It was 1,000 times slower than Naruto would have liked, but his teacher had a lot of cuts and scrapes from using his Sharingan too much. The mask he had worn quickly fell off when the door closed, revealing his true feelings once more. He went back to the boardwalk and sat down on the edge of the pier, crossing his legs. He had a sad face. Naruto took off his jacket so that the cool ocean breeze could caress him in a way that felt like a mother hugging her child after a long day. He looked into the water with a sad face. He looked at how his moonlit, skewed reflection in the waves moved and rippled, catching the new shine in his eyes. He added chakra to his eyes more out of curiosity than anything else. This broke his irises and turned the crystal blue eyes into broken mirrors that reflected light. One thing Haku was right about was how beautiful they were. He let out a sigh while his eyes were still open and remembered what he had called them, the Rin'negan. Naruto growled into the air, "That doesn't even sound cool at all." It needed a better name because the one that was given was too simple. Instead of the half crazy name he came up with on the spot, he needed something much more elegant and beautiful. It had to be called something cool since it was a bloodline limit that copied other limits. As he looked up at the moon, he thought about what Haku had said about his eyes. The fake hunter. Nin thought they were the most beautiful eyes he had ever seen. Naku asked the sky, "What would you call it, Haku?" He was hoping that the boy with dark hair would appear out of nowhere and tell him. Naruto turned his attention back to his distorted reflection, hoping that something would come to mind if he looked at it for a long time. He needed something that could both describe how beautiful the eyes were and make the people he would fight in the future afraid. Because he knew something else, the blonde sighed. What was he going to tell his teammates about this? He frowned at the thought of having to tell Sasuke that his eyes were silver. He didn't know what the Uchiha would do if he found out that someone else in the group also had a limit. Still, why should he tell anyone? He promised Haku that he would look after his eyes, after all. Naruto then started to wonder what time it was. He could only guess, but based on the moon, it was probably around 10:30 at night. He sighed when he thought about how long the night was going to be. He had to do something, but besides train, what was there? He still had to go to the house where the demon of the hidden mist used to live and do what Haku had asked, but was that a good idea? The blonde prankster thought about it for a second and then decided what he was going to do all night. He was going to find where Zabuza and Haku were hiding. But he ran into a problem. It was hard to get around at night in a thick forest, even with the moon full. There was something he needed, but he wasn't sure that his mirror like eyes would let him see. There had to be another Dojutsu that could at least see better, like the Sharingan. The Uzumaki made a noise under his breath. He still didn't know how to use the copied limits, but now was the perfect time to learn. As he knelt on the edge of the docks and looked at his skewed reflection, he made a determined face and thought of all the ways he could possibly go about this. To begin, he tried to force his eyes to do what he wanted, which was to make them spin like a pinwheel eye. Naruto growled in irritation as he was getting more and more angry. But all of his hard work paid off when he saw the mirror pieces of his eyes fall out and reveal a Sharingan. He stood up straight and looked around in the dark. His spinning red eyes stood out against the black air. It became more clear to him, and he could see the dark world around him more clearly. At first, Naruto could only see the shapes of the things around him. He smiled. It wasn't clear enough for him to see in the dark, but it did help him find things. After getting his supplies from the house, the blonde thought that this was the best place to try out his new eyes since everyone was asleep and sawing logs. He slowly opened the door and checked to make sure everything was okay. Only a trained shinobi could make him glide across the floor without making a sound. He took a deep breath. He looked up and down the stairs several times to make sure no one was there. When he felt safe enough, he slowly climbed them like a ghost. As he opened the door to the room he shared with his rival, he looked around again. Naruto smiled as he thought about how simple it would be to play a joke on the boy with black hair, but he didn't because he knew the boy was on a personal mission. The blonde quickly gathered his basic gear and put it in his backpack. He was quiet so as not to wake Sasuke. It was his last chance, though, because one of his kunai suddenly fell out of his bag and made a noise that could wake up any average shinobi with half a brain. He felt bad about being so careless because he was both a shinobi and a prankster. But then again, he wasn't using common sense when he said a few bad words afterward either. The Uchiha woke up when he heard a loose kunai hit the ground, but he didn't do anything because he could hear his teammate swearing in silence. He saw the blonde putting things in his backpack when he opened one eye. Sasuke kept his eyes on the blonde as he watched him walk to the doorway and look around the room again. He was caught off guard when he saw that Naruto's eyes weren't crystal blue but red. Naruto was too far away for Sasuke to see his copied Sharingan. What was going on? Sasuke asked. But Naruto quickly ran down the hall without making a sound. When Sasuke heard the front door quietly close, he jumped out of bed and ran to the window just in time to see the blonde storm heading into the forest. His orange coat was undone and flapping behind him as he sped up. Dobi, what the hell are you doing? Sasuke thought. As he ran to get his own supplies and follow his teammate, Sasuke narrowed his eyes. He was quickly stopped when the pain in his side told him he needed to rest. He growled as he reluctantly agreed to stay the night. When he got back, he was going to make sure the blonde gave him the answer. At the middle of the village, Naruto jumped to a roof and stopped to think about what time it might be. He thought it might have been around 11 o'clock. He knew it would be easier to find the hiding place during the day, but he wanted to do this now so no one would see him. His Sharingan looked around the village that was asleep for a high point that he could use. He was lucky that there was a water tower on the corner of town. He jumped from the rooftops to the tower and put chakra on his feet to help him walk up one of the beams until he reached the top. With his crimson eyes, he looked around again. If I were a ninja and needed a place to hide out, it would be. He slowly moved his finger around the area, trying to figure out where a shinobi on the run would go to hide. He stopped his finger on a very thicket of trees about a mile from the village. Right over there. Moving on with his journey to the hideout, he jumped from his perch on the tower. After another hour, Naruto was about a mile outside of the village. The air was thick with fog, which made his Sharingan almost useless. It didn't help that it was night either. He snarled in anger and ran to the top of the nearest tree to look at the moon. When he realized he was going around in circles, he twisted his face in irritation. He was quickly losing ground. He jumped back to the forest floor with a frown on his face and looked around again, his red eyes still having trouble making out shapes. He could see why Kakashi Sensei was having trouble fighting Zabuza. The mist was making everything hard to see. Naruto growled and started walking again, but as he turned, he felt his face hit a wall. The blonde with the sun on his head rubbed it, and his eyes lit up with joy when he saw the wall of a building. He finally found the place. It was a good choice for the demon of the hidden mist to hide. Even during the day, it would have been annoying to find. The Jinchuriki went around in a circle, looking for a way in. When he found the front door, he let his foxy grin go around his face. Naruto took a step back to get a better look at the area. He saw that it used to be the home of a notoriously dangerous shinobi. Looking at the building from the outside, it did look pretty scary. He took a deep breath, then turned the doorknob to open it. The place was lit up with the flip of a switch. When Naruto walked in, he was ready for a lot of things. He thought there might be a wall full of weapons, heads mounted as trophies from different missions, or even a torture chamber. He didn't think he'd find a place so easy. The room didn't have much furniture. A couch and a coffee table were the only things that stood out. The blonde stopped giving his eyes chakra because he knew no one could see him. The Sharingan broke and turned his eyes back into broken mirrors. Then sparkly pieces fell out of his eyes, leaving them completely blue. The pupils, on the other hand, kept their mirror-like look. After quickly finding a hallway, Naruto slowly made his way down it, hoping that the Nin hadn't set up any traps. By the time he got to the first room, his worries were over. Based on the size of the room, Naruto thought it was Zabuza's. Like the living room, it was empty except for a bed and a nightstand next to it. He didn't pay attention to the room and went further into the house before he reached the room he had named Haku's. It was simple and had only the bare necessities, like the rest of the house. The only thing that stood out was a mirror above the chest of drawers that had white flowers in a vase that he couldn't name. The hunter Nin mask next to the vase let him know it was the boys' room. He carefully walked over to the drawers and started to look through the clothes right away, being careful not to stir up any dust. Now was the time to start looking for the scrolls that Haku had asked him to have. As he opened the first one, he stopped and looked at a neatly folded pair of water goggles. When he looked at them, he knew they were used a lot. It's likely because the Hyouten user had a strange interest in water, but that could also have been because he was actively using the limit. While staring at them, Naruto cocked his head and thought of something. He did this for a few minutes. He didn't want anyone to see his eyes during the day because that would be a problem, but what he saw here could be the answer to his prayers. As the blonde spoke into the air, "Sorry, Haku, but I really need them," half expecting the dead boy to walk in on him at any moment. He put them on, took a deep breath, and looked at himself in the mirror. People could see his eyes through the tint, even though they were light. He had to agree that they didn't make him look too bad. On top of that, they were a lot more comfortable than the big ones he had at home. As he thought about putting them on, he felt like he was honoring the Hyouten user's memory in some way. Not just by learning how to attack and trick him. As long as no one was around, he took off the goggles and hung them around his neck like a necklace. Then he kept looking for the ninjutsu scrolls. It had been 5 messy drawers and he still hadn't found them. There were only 2 more places to look, under the bed and in the closet. From the look of the closet, he knew it wasn't possible because it was pretty empty, leaving only the bed. He put his head down on the ground quickly and looked under the bed. He laughed as he found a tin box. With a happy grin, he took it out and opened the lid. Inside, he saw a big scroll and some smaller ones stacked neatly on top of each other. The blonde thought he had found gold. As Naruto took off his backpack and carefully put the scrolls next to his supplies, he smiled like he had won. He made sure that none of his spare weapons would damage the valuable items. As he threw his bag over his back and got ready to leave, he stopped to look at the mirror on the dresser and saw his own eyes staring back at him. The thought of seeing himself in his eyes was very unsettling. He seemed to be able to see into his own soul. He was about to close his eyes when he saw something else, the reflection of the flowers. As Naruto looked at the reflection, he almost felt like he was under a spell. He smiled when he finally figured out a problem he had been having since he got back from the bridge. It seemed like a long time had passed. He quietly told himself, "Yeah, that's a great name for it." His smile got a little bigger. Kyokugen. The way the name came out of his mouth was almost poetic. That one word made sense of both the power and beauty in his eyes. It also gave meaning to the mirrors that were his eyes. He knew what bloodline limits were, but he could never really understand them. He could copy them, but he could never claim them as his own. Mirror Flower Eye. Oh, Haku. He smiled and thought, even after you die, you're still helping me out. He thought about everything he claimed before he let himself leave the room. The main goal of this whole trip was to get the scroll with all the ice techniques. But on the way, he found a pair of water goggles that could hide his eyes. He also gave his Dojutsu a good name that he was sure Haku would be proud of. Overall, it was a very useful trip. His last look around him was enough for him to leave the room. He then went to the front door. Before he broke his eyes and called on the Sharingan again, Naruto took a deep breath of the night air. To his mild surprise, the pieces that came out of his eyes when he used a limit fell much more slowly than all at once. After 7 seconds, his blood red eyes started to spin again. He remembered that it took longer than usual to change to a limit. He jumped up into the trees and quickly moved from one tree to the next. He could move faster because there wasn't any mist where he had been. The blonde finally got back to Tizuna's just as the sun started to change colors in the sky. Everyone still looked like they were sleeping from the outside, but he couldn't tell what his teammates would do. Regularly, Shinobi would get up early to train or do other things. Before anyone could wake up and find out that the blonde had gone away for the night, he quickly put on his new glasses and used chakra to quickly climb up the wall that held the window to his room. Naruto carefully opened the window so as not to wake up his teammate who hates him from his beauty sleep. He put his heavy bag next to his futon and quickly took off his jacket, leaving him in orange pants and a black shirt. He took off his goggles and hung them around his neck before he laid down to get some sleep. He finally let his head hit the pillow, and he started snoring in less than 2 minutes. Sakura went down the hall to get her friends for breakfast. Tsunami was kind enough to make a big meal to say thank you for standing up for her dad. It was 9:15. She opened the door and said in a happy voice, "Breakfast is ready, guys." Slowly, Sasuke got up. He popped his back and worked out the knots in his neck from yesterday's fight. When he looked over at Naruto's bed, he thought his teammate was gone, so he was a little surprised to see a tuft of blonde hair sticking out from under the blankets. Sakura didn't like how the boy with the whiskers ignored her. "Naruto, get the hell out of bed." He replied with a snore and then said, "5 more minutes." Under his breath, which they both heard. He was really awake. His sensitive hearing woke him up as soon as she opened the door, but he couldn't let them both see his Kyokugen. He was not going to get out of bed until they both left. The girl on his team with pink hair wasn't going to make things easy, though. "If you don't get out of bed, I'm going to." "Take a deep breath, Sakura. Chan. Take a bite to eat without me. Give me a few minutes to at least get half dressed," he said in a sleepy voice from under his blankets. Both of the other people in the room raised an eyebrow at Naruto's strange behavior. It was unusual for him to be the first person downstairs for a meal. He asked them to begin without him. They weren't sure for a second if he was on their team. The girl with the green eyes asked Sasuke a question, but the boy with the black hair just shrugged. Sasuke had raised an eyebrow at the blonde. Ignoring his teammate, Sasuke slowly forced his tired legs to carry him downstairs, where food was ready. Naruto threw the blankets off his head and let out a happy sigh as soon as the door shut, letting him know that his team was gone. And like Sasuke, he got up to eat breakfast. But before he left the bedroom, he made sure to put his goggles over his eyes. He still had on his black shirt and orange pants, but he left the rest of his clothes, including his favorite headband, next to his things. When Naruto came downstairs, he wasn't wearing his usual clothes, he was just wearing a black shirt and orange pants, and he wasn't wearing his headband. Instead, he was wearing water goggles. He didn't have a headband on, so his hair was even more wild. However, the goggles were the ones that were all eyes. Sakura was the first to ask him about it when he sat down at the table. "Hey, Naruto, where'd you get those goggles?" The sun kissed Genin looked up from his food when he heard his name called out. Everyone, including Tizuna and Inari, was interested in how he got his new glasses. He was now trying to choose the best excuse as they flew through his head like flies over a dead body. He forgot one thing last night, he needed to make an excuse. As soon as Sasuke spoke, things got worse. "Let me ask you something else. Last night, where were you?" That question made Kakashi raise an eyebrow and look up from his well-known orange book. Naruto stayed up late last night for a reason. At last, an answer stuck. Naruto said with a shrug, "Last night I was training. I went outside to do some work because I couldn't sleep. As for the glasses, I thought they were fair." He wasn't sure what they would do if they found out he went to the hideout, but he really hoped that everyone believed him. Kakashi gave him a shrug and turned back to his always interesting book, which made him feel better. Inari and Tizuna went back to their food. Sakura just let out a frustrated sigh because she thought her teammate was acting like always. Sasuke, on the other hand, wasn't at all sure. He said it slowly, with a smug look on his face that said, "Oh really? Then why were you packing your backpack last night?" As soon as the Uchiha spoke, Naruto coughed on his food. Because he was wearing tinted glasses, no one could see how angry he got over that one question. His eyes were so blue that they broke into broken mirrors. But one of the Junin in the group could feel a chakra spike in the air, as if someone had used a jutsu. He thought for a moment that Hyouden might be able to push an icicle up his teammates behind. That is, after he learned how to use it. On the other hand, he might not be able to get it past the stick up there. He was also annoyed when everyone's attention turned back to him. This time, though, he put down his book and stared hard at his blonde student. Even though Naruto might be able to trick Sakura and Sasuke, it was really hard to beat a Junin who was trained to spot lies. This proved that the crazy knucklehead was up to no good, and the chakra spike only made Kakashi want to know more. Naruto laughed as he came up with another reason to hurt him. "Okay, I'll say it. My bag with all of my extra weapons was important. Teme, are you happy, or do you need to tell me something else?" "Naruto, calm down," Kakashi told Naruto, and his lazy look came back to his eye. "I saw that you worked out last night. It doesn't bother me, and it shouldn't bother you too either." The last part was aimed at the other two Team 7 members, which made them both go back to eating their breakfast. But Sasuke turned around and went back to his work with a frown. "Now," Kakashi went on, "I believe we should all take a day off to unwind. Naruto, that also includes you." Naruto was now the one who had to scowl at the man in the mask. On the bright side, he had a few scrolls that he could read if he couldn't train. "Alright, fine," Naruto said. "But there is no way in hell that I'm going to stay in this house all day." Kakashi said, "That's fine." The copycat thought, good. If he has something to hide, he'll be more open about it when he's alone. I really hope it has nothing to do with the Kyuubi. The blonde quickly ate all of his food and ran to his room to get dressed. "Has Naruto been acting strange since we left the bridge? Is it just me?" Sakura asked Sasuke in a whisper. "He's trying to stay away from us, you know. He was also the last person to breakfast, which never happens." Once upon a time, Sasuke couldn't help but agree with her. They were the last thing Naruto thought about after the battle with the nuke. Nin. Because of that and the strange things he did last night, his brain had come up with one logical reason: Naruto was hiding something. He replied in a whisper, "You know, I don't think he's telling us something." Sakura thought about it for a moment before it all made sense. "Wait a second. Yes, you are." He wanted to find out what the blonde would want to hide from everyone now that he knew what it was. If it wasn't something important, Sakura would have told Sasuke. But the day the Dobi told him a secret was the day hell would freeze over. When he realized he needed help, he cracked open. Naruto would be happy to talk to him. "Sakura," he said to the girl to get her attention, "he would never tell me what he's hiding. It interests me, and I think it interests you too." It looked like the cherry blossom was listening to her crush like it was life or death. She quickly moved her head back and forth. He took a deep breath as he made the offer.
"We're going to have to work together if we want to find out."
In Sakura's mind, there were only two words: work together. She was just asked to help Sasuke. Dreams do come true. The Uchiha, on the other hand, was moving away slowly. Sakura was looking off into space with hearts in her eyes. As the two people on Team 7 watched their blonde teammate run past them with his backpack, she quickly pulled herself together. Just as everyone looked out the window, the living maelstrom made his way into the forest. "Okay, I'll do it." Sakura got excited and agreed. Sasuke thought for a split second that he had made the worst decision of his life. Two other people had been listening in on the conversation, but they didn't know it. The first was Kakashi, who thought he should get to Naruto before they did. The other one was Inari. The little boy, on the other hand, thought he could help his fake big brother protect whatever secret he was keeping. As the man got up from the table and put his book away, everyone looked at Kakashi. He said, "Excuse me. I forgot to ask Naruto about something. Before the other two do, I need to find him and ask him about what he's hiding." The wiry man left through the front door, giving the two new players time to think of ways to get their hyperactive, rude teammate to talk. And while they talked, Inari planned his own tricks to get back at them. Naruto finally found a good clearing that was well hidden enough that it would take a lot of work for his teammates to find. He sat down on a big rock sticking out of the ground and took off his backpack to get one of the scrolls. He smiled with fun. He felt around in the bag and took out the first thing that caught his eye. When it was unrolled, it revealed a medic Nin scroll with acupuncture points on it. He did not have the time or patience to practice something like that right now. Aside from that, he needed Senbon, which he didn't have quite yet. It was thin, so he set it down and picked up another scroll. He smiled as he took it out and saw a taijutsu scroll on it. The only thing that made him less excited was that it was a fighting style based on medic Nin. But he quickly got really excited again when he saw that it had been changed to make it a new way to fight. Even though it was focused on accuracy. He set it down next to the other scroll because he knew he would need to learn it later. When he saw the next scroll, it made him smile so big that it almost split his head in half. Water guillotine technique was the name of the water ninjutsu. If that was possible, he smiled even bigger as he read the note on the scroll that said it was a B level move. His list of things to practice for the day was cut short because it required a lot of precision. He again dug through his backpack like a kid looking for the newest cookies at the bottom of the jar. This time, he pulled out a bigger scroll than the one that had the water release, water guillotine technique on it. I quickly looked over what it was and saw that it was a scroll with Haku's notes on Hyouden, as well as chakra theories and the right way to combine the chakras. That was going to be important for him. The ninjutsu on the scroll made Naruto beg to learn it, and the next one he pulled out of the bag made him salivate with excitement. The attack was only 3/4 done, but it had to be the strongest water jutsu Naruto had ever seen. It was quickly put into S class. It needed a lot of chakra and control, but who said the blonde wasn't up for a challenge? Or an edge over his rival? He then realized that Haku hadn't finished the attack before he died. He was now driven to finish the attack where the boy with dark hair had left off. Someone spoke out in the clearing, "I didn't know you read so much." He was about to take out the Hyouden scroll to finally take a quick look at it. Naruto looked like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, both in a bad way and in a good way. His hand was in the bag. Taking a glance upward, he saw Kakashi lying down on a branch above him, one leg hanging off the side of the branch. The man didn't seem to be reading, which was pleasant. Instead of his book, he had a look that was both interested and suspicious. "They were gifts from a friend," Naruto replied with a suspicious look on his face. "Really?" Kakashi asked, interested in what he had just heard. "Did they come from Iruka? Or another person?" In a hurry, Naruto lied and said, "They were from Iruka." "Sensei. Well, I'm just glad that you're doing as told and actually trying to relax. But there isn't much to do here besides train," the maelstrom said in a low voice. "Yes, I would agree, but if you don't give your body a break you can burn yourself out." Kakashi took a quick breath and then asked another question. "So what's with the goggles?" Naruto just shrugged and stuck to the lie he told everyone at breakfast. "I found them and I thought they looked cool." The older ninja closed his eyes for a second and felt like he had just had a very strong déjà vu. "That was funny. Goggles were worn by my old teammate too," he said, thinking back to Obito. Naruto asked, "Really?" He was becoming more interested. "Oh yeah," Kakashi said with a smile behind his mask. He knew he had broken down some barriers and was one step closer to finding out what his student was hiding. "In fact, you two act a lot alike." He was at least 2 hours late to everything, that was the only difference. "He was my best friend. We were a lot alike, but I behaved more like Sasuke." "You acted like Sasuke?" When Naruto asked, he was shocked that their sensei had acted like his jerk of a teammate earlier. "Yes. Following the rules all the time was important to me, and I often thought the mission was more important than my team. But I feel bad about that behavior every day of my life." "What made you change?" As Naruto watched his sensei's one eye suddenly show sadness, he began to feel bad about asking the question. Before he could say sorry, the man with silver hair answered with a bit of emotion in his voice. "Obito died. Because I do the things I do, you could say that I remember him." Naruto's face quickly turned ugly as he thought about his fight with Haku. He had no idea that he and his sensei were so much alike in that way. Each of them was remembering someone who had taught them a very important lesson. He had to do it to stay close to the person he could have called friend. "Naruto, you can tell me if something is bothering you." Kakashi told his student, "I really want you to be able to trust me." He was trying to build trust between them. These days, he hadn't been showing it, but he did care about him. It was almost impossible to believe how much the blonde looked like Obito. In fact, he also reminded him of his old teacher. He didn't want to pick favorites like some teachers did. Naruto was going back and forth in his mind about whether to trust Kakashi or not. He really needed to talk to someone about how he felt because he knew he had lost someone close to him, but he didn't know who. And then there was the limit of his bloodline. He really wanted to tell everyone about it, but he knew it could be dangerous because he only had a vague idea of what it could do. Naruto thought the Scarecrow was great because he was willing to talk to him about his past when his teammates weren't around. So badly did he need someone besides Iruka to lean on, but could he trust him? After a while, he finally asked the man in the mask, "You wouldn't tell anyone, right?" "Yes, of course. I promise I won't tell anyone, but if it's dangerous, I might have trouble keeping it a secret," Kakashi replied, finally happy that he could become a teacher. Naruto nodded to show that he understood. Then he took a deep breath and let his mask slip a little. His face became heavier, showing that he was going through hard times. He tried very hard not to cry as he said, before the battle, I met Haku. But he knew it wouldn't help. Naruto took off his goggles because he knew he couldn't stop the tears that were coming out of his eyes. When Naruto started to talk about something else, Kakashi jumped down from his perch and sat down next to him. We might have been friends. There was a lot we shared." For the first time, the blonde could feel the cold metal running down his face. Kakashi felt sorry for Naruto and remembered some people he knew but had lost. He was thinking about his old friends when he saw Naruto's tear of liquid silver dripping onto his jacket and leaving a metallic stain on it. His one eye grew a little bigger. The Scarecrow was caught off guard when his student finally opened his eyes and saw his silvery pupils. He had no idea that the blonde had learned Dojutsu. I just wish things were different. Then he might still be alive, and I wouldn't be alone again." After holding back his feelings for a few days, Naruto finally let out some of them through another silvery tear that fell on his jacket. It was killing Kakashi to find out about the boy's strange eyes, but now wasn't the right time. His student needed to be comforted right then because he had lost someone he had thought of as a friend and comrade. This was something he himself could believe. "Naruto," he said to ease his pain. "Listen up, there are still people who care about you. You got me, you got Iruka, and you got the Sandame. Or at least I hope you let me in. I understand how hard it is to lose someone. Don't worry about how you feel. I understand better than you think. You need to move on and try to live for the future because it will only hurt you more." Naruto kept his cool for a moment as he tried to understand what the copycat said. And yes, he still had Iruka and Gigi. But now he felt like he could add the man with silver hair to the list. Some people found it hard to lose someone they cared about. Kakashi sat next to him and waited for his student to calm down. It was never easy to deal with death, especially when a loved one died. Even though Naruto and Zabuza's student were close, they both had to act like shinobi on the bridge at that very moment. One of them had to die no matter what. That's how ninjas did things. Why does everyone have to die? Naruto asked with a new tear that ran down his cheek. The Scarecrow just shrugged and said, "Death is more universal than life. Some people live, but everyone has to die at some point. People need to learn this lesson again." The Junin with one eye thought it was funny that he had switched places with his sensei. Like many times before, when Naruto was having a bad day or just needed some advice, Minato would comfort him. Kakashi couldn't help but smile when he thought about how quickly people could change roles. He might want to talk to his student like his old sensei did with him when things were really tough. When Naruto felt his sensei put a hand on his shoulder and tell him to look up, he did so with his Kyokugen eyes. Each of us is going down a path that will end in death. It's always the same, though sometimes it's a little too sudden. We all get to the same place. It can be cut off very quickly for shinobi, but that's why we should live our lives without regret. Haku did it. We should honor the fact that he fought for something he really believed in. Naruto listened with a sad smile on his face. That's right, Kakashi. Death was just a part of life that everyone had to deal with at some point. Thank you, sir. I believe I understand. The man in question smiled with his eyes. No trouble. Now let's talk about your eyes. It made Naruto want to shrink when he looked into Kakashi's eye. We won't worry about them now. I think we should talk to the Sandaime about it when we get back home. Do you get it? Naruto agreed by nodding his head and saying, yes, sensei. Good. It's okay for me to talk about it now, but if you made a new bloodline limit, who knows who might be listening in. The Scarecrow's mind went to his other two students, who were probably making plans for how they were going to find out the truth. So, for the moment, it will be our little secret. The blonde gave another head nod. It was much easier to keep a secret when someone else told you about it. The living waves watched as Kakashi got up slowly and stretched out his back. I think I'll go to the roof and read my favorite book for now. Yes, please keep reading those scrolls. When we get back to Konoha, I'll find out how you got them. The copycat walked slowly out of the clearing to give things some thought. He knew what Naruto was going through because he was going to go through the same thing eventually. But what he really needed to think about was how Naruto came up with the Dojutsu. Making out in paradise was sure to help clear the mind. When Sasuke and Sakura were whispering to each other across the table at Tezuna's house, Inari paid close attention to every detail of their plans. He had a plan B for every single one of them. The Haruno and the Uchiha were not going to have a good day tomorrow. Sakura walked down the hall to the boys' room to wake up her teammates for breakfast. As she did so, she and Sasuke talked about the plans they had made to get the blonde to tell them his dark secrets. They were very smart. That was the end of it. When they were done with their teammate, he was going to tell them everything about his life. She opened the door and said, "Guys, it's time for breakfast. Naruto, you better get up now before I beat you up. Being late is rude." The blonde let out a loud yawn as he took off his blankets to show that he had slept with his goggles on. Not long after, Sasuke stood up and gave their teammate a strange look when he brought his new clothes to bed with him. The Uchiha asked, "You wore those things to bed?" Naruto yawned again and worked the knots out of his back while nodding his head yes. Without even saying, "Good morning," the hyperactive member of Team 7 skipped breakfast ahead of his confused teammates. As soon as the girl with pink hair and the boy with black hair went downstairs, they could hear Naruto eating at lightning fast speeds. They didn't have to scold their teammate because Kakashi was reading a book at the same time. "Naruto, I may not be a specialist in manners, but I do know that you're eating way too fast." He said, "Sorry sensei, but I need to get done so I can train since I couldn't yesterday." While taking a bite. He was really looking forward to training today for a reason. Naruto wanted to work on his Hyouden, but he couldn't because his teacher told him to calm down. Plus, he still had to read the Hyouden Jujutsu scroll because he had spent the rest of the day yesterday studying the physics and theories behind the ice abilities. By the time the other members of Team 7 got to the table, he was eating much more slowly. As Sasuke sat down, he used his eyes to show that they should begin their plans. His partner in crime nodded her head as she approached the blonde demon container to start a basic interrogation. It was simple and a good place to start, but they had better ideas ready for when things got tough. Inari kept a close eye on the two people and kept track of every single move they made. It was the first try, and now it was time to launch the counterattack. Sakura was about to ask a question when she felt something wet hit her in the face. When Sasuke looked at his partner to see why she was taking so long, he felt his eyebrows rise above his hairline as he saw breakfast on her face. When she realized what had happened, her eyes got as big as saucers. It was like an Akamichi trying to get to an all-you can eat buffet. Naruto's laughing so hard that he fell out of his chair didn't make things better. As Haruno slowly turned her head to look at the person who did it, you could hear the muscles in her neck tensing up. Soon, everyone came together to see Inari doing everything he could to look like he wasn't doing anything wrong. He pointed his finger at his grandfather, who was happily reading the morning paper, because he knew he wasn't getting very far. Kakashi grabbed Sakura by the ankle in midair and stopped her in her tracks as she jumped across the table to choke the boy, who was still reading his book. As expected, the older man's grip on the cherry blossom made it hard for her to move as she tried to crawl across the table to continue her revenge. Inari, on the other hand, hid under the table to avoid being killed. Naruto laughed and yelled, "Nice one, Inari." It was enough for the angry girl to scream at him, "Don't encourage him." The person on her team should have stopped there, but Naruto felt his shut up filter stop all of a sudden.
I'm just saying, it was good prank, and I'm just jealous I didn't think of it first. It moved too fast for the eye to follow. Sakura didn't go after her original target. Instead, she jumped on the blonde and hit him so hard that he fell to the ground. His screams of pain could now be heard all over the house. Kakashi just sighed at their antics, while Sasuke could feel himself wincing with every hit the Dobi took. He almost felt sorry for the stupid fool, but that was the important word. Oh, if only Naruto had been smart. On the other hand, Inari pumped his arm under the table to show that he had won. The first of the attacks he had planned had worked. Naruto took his backpack and walked into the forest around the house. He wanted to find a place to train where no one could see him. He soon found an open area with a small pool of water that he could use for his Hyouden. It was a great place to practice manipulating water without any nosy teammates around to get in the way. He took off his bag and opened it to get the scroll that had Haku's notes on Hyouden, explaining how it worked. He gave it one last quick look and then told himself it was okay to start. The other members of Team 7 were planning their next move after Plan A didn't go as planned in the bushes behind the blonde who didn't know what was going on. Plan B was now being made, and Sasuke was giving the girl with the pink hair his motivational speech. Whatever you do, told the Uchiha, don't lose your temper. If that happens, he might become too afraid. Don't blow it. She bobbed her head back and forth as she worked hard to remember their main plan. It was easy. Just flirt with him a little, be nice, and allow him to let down his guard. Then he'll start to tell you everything. It's short, sweet, and to the point, so it should work. When the Uchiha gave her the last hint, she quietly came out from behind the bush and made her way to Naruto, who wasn't aware she was there. When she tried to smile, it didn't seem real to her, and she was afraid that the blonde with the sun on her skin wouldn't believe her. The closer she got, the less nervous she felt because she was interested. Naruto was reading a scroll, which she had never seen him do before, which made her a little surprised. He was always too excited to want to read a book. She moved a little closer than she should have to see if she could make out anything on the paper, which made Sasuke look nervous or annoyed at her. From where she was, she could only make out a few words, like ice and manipulation. Hyouden was a word she couldn't figure out and had never heard of before. When she got close enough, the blonde's ears twitched, which meant he could feel her. She was a little scared when Naruto quickly rolled up his scroll and then turned to her with one of his sly grins on his face, which made her squeak in mild shock. Hey Sakura. Chan. What are you doing here? He wanted to know. She couldn't find the words for a second, but she quickly got them back and tried to keep what little dignity she still had. Sakura put on something that looked like a puppy. Dog pouted and said, I was just a little worried. You've been acting weird lately, and I just want to make sure that everything is okay. To make things more interesting, she slowly moved away from Naruto, which caught him off guard. In the bushes, Sasuke was grinning like the Uchiha, because he knew Naruto was about to give up. This was a little strange for Naruto. 1. Sakura was being nice and closing the gap between them quickly. Right now, he could feel that his 12-inch comfortable clearance was being used up quickly. 2. She was beginning to look cute to him, which was something he thought would only happen in his dreams. At this point, 2 and 2 were not adding up correctly. She tried to make it sound better by raising her voice. I just hope there's nothing wrong. You can always talk to me about anything. When Inari saw that they were trying to get the blonde to talk, he changed his mind about his original plan to just jump in and distract Naruto. Oh no. The other one was better, and it would really make the Uchiha feel like he was on fire. Sasuke wasn't expecting the little boy to come up behind him with a box of matches that he had taken from the kitchen. As quietly as possible, he lit one with an evil smile. Then, while his target was looking away, he waved the lit match under the dark haired boy's bottom to change the meaning of the phrase, liar, liar, pants on fire. Naruto's nervous look quickly changed into one that made him look like something bad had happened right in front of him. When Sakura thought she might fail, Naruto asked, is it just me, or is something burning? This stopped her in her tracks. The kunoichi with bubblegum hair gave him an odd look, but it quickly changed when she smelled something. Actually, I think there is something burning. Sasuke was sweating in the bushes and couldn't figure out why his behind felt like it was on fire. Suddenly, he felt his pants catch fire, which made him freak out.
he ran quickly to the nearby pool of water, giving up on his plan to get Naruto to talk in favor of avoiding third-degree burns. The other two people on Team 7 watched as the Uchiha ran past them in a blur of blue light and black smoke. It was likely the first and only time Naruto would ever hear him scream like a girl. There was a sound like a fire being put out for a few seconds, and then there was a deep sigh of relief. When the smoke cleared, Naruto fell over laughing so hard he couldn't stop. Seeing Sasuke run around with his behind on fire was worth 1,000,000 bowls of ramen. And what were the chances that he would see it today out of all the days he lived? That being said, Sakura had slapped her hand over her eyes to hide her shame. That just messed up Plan B. It was time to start over. They came in for lunch, and Kakashi looked up from his porn when he saw them. There she was, holding up Sasuke again. He looked like he was having trouble standing in the first place. But Naruto. The blonde said, "I still can't believe that your behind caught on fire. What the hell were you doing? Did you fart out a fireball or something?" As he laughed and held on to his backpack. Even though Sasuke looked like he was going to kill his teammate, he didn't say anything. He still didn't know how his behind had spontaneously caught fire in the first place. As he walked alone to his room in pain, the Uchiha said, "I'm going to get some new clothes." When the scary clown saw Sasuke's bottom, which was black from the fire, his eyebrows went up past his hairline. At the very least, the burn looked like a really bad sunburn, so it wasn't very dangerous. But things wouldn't be easy for Sasuke if he chose to sit down. "Well, that was funny," said the smiling blonde, "but I'm going to go and train some more. I don't think I'll be back till dinner." Then Kakashi added, "That's fine, but don't overdo it. I plan on having us have a team practice after dinner." Naruto yelled, "Got it," and gave a fake salute. When they said goodbye, the crazy knucklehead from Team 7 ran into the forest, swaying his backpack as he ran. Sakura sighed as she went upstairs to find her partner in crime so she could tell them what she had seen on Naruto's scroll. Their last plan didn't quite work out, so while her teammate was away, they worked on a plan C. She went to his door and asked if she could come in. The girl with pink hair almost laughed when she saw Sasuke, who was fully dressed, trying hard to sit on his bed as quietly as possible. He finally got through the task of trying to relax on his bed with one last look filled with pain. "Well, that didn't exactly go according to plan," he said. "No, it didn't, but how the heck did your pants catch on fire exactly?" Sakura sought answers. Sasuke just shrugged his shoulders because he still couldn't figure out who did it. Naruto saw him the whole time, so it couldn't have been him. If it was really him, he had to agree that the blonde really was the best at pulling pranks. He was going to hell before he said that out loud, though. The cherry blossom said, "Anyway, I did catch a little of what Naruto was reading." This caught the Uchiha's attention right away. Naruto never read, and picked up a book only rarely. For the blonde to sit down and read something was like Sasuke dancing in a pink tutu. Nothing like that ever happens, but the impossible did happen, and Naruto stayed calm enough to skim over a scroll. The boy with dark hair asked, "What did it say?" He didn't try to hide his interest in the question. "I only got a few words. I believe they were manipulation and ice. But there was this one word." She thought as she put her finger to her chin. "Well?" he asked quickly. "Yes, that's the word. Hyouden," she said. "Ice release," the Uchiha thought with doubt. It had to be a joke, right? It was impossible for a shinobi to just make ice. The 5 basic things were all a ninja could use. Then he thought back to his fight with Haku. In his mind, he remembered how the fake hunter Nin made the ice mirrors and the senbon. He also remembered hearing the word Hyouden briefly during the fierce battle, but no one went into more detail. Thought those were some of the coolest jutsu he had ever seen, but he was sad that his Sharingan wasn't working at the time so he couldn't copy them. He thought both of the techniques he had seen were amazing, and the ice mirror jutsu was clearly S class. But were the attacks done to hide something? Was there a bigger reason why no one else in the world knew about these ice jutsu? Even better, how did Naruto get the scrolls that held the items if his theory that the blonde got them somehow turned out to be true? As Sakura tried to wake him up, she asked, "Sasuke-kun?" For a split second, he shook his head to bring himself back to the present. They found out that this secret went a little deeper than they thought at first. Sakura confirmed that. "I'm sorry, I had something on my mind," Sasuke said. "Hey, do you think that there's something a little deeper going on than we think?" While she was thinking, Sakura sat down on the floor and looked under the floor. At first glance, only Naruto's time spent reading, his strange goggles, and the fact that he was by himself seemed out of the ordinary. There was no trouble for anyone else but Kakashi to talk to Naruto so far. But she knew secrets when she was a girl. What made them work was that they were always about something that someone didn't want other people to know. Finding that center point was always the key to solving the mystery. It was like putting together a puzzle. One big problem was that some people hid things so well that it was impossible to get even a small indication. She asked, "Do you know where some paper is? It'll be easier for us to try and add things up if we write down what we know." As Sasuke carefully moved to his backpack, being careful not to hurt his still sore butt, he told her yes. He couldn't find any paper, so he gave her a blank scroll and a pen instead. Before she wrote anything down, she tried to remember all the strange things Naruto was doing. First, there were the goggles. He hadn't taken them off since the day after the battle, and he wouldn't say where he got them. His isolation, which began minutes after the battle, was the second thing. Third, he did strange things, like reading and taking his sweet time to get to breakfast. In other words, he did things that were not Naruto. Like. Something else came to her mind, but she tried to push the thought to the back of her mind but couldn't. Her mind was still scarred from the horrible events on the bridge, and she didn't want to remember them. But did it have anything to do with Naruto's secret? "Sasuke-kun, do you remember your fight with the Kiri Nin?" she asked. He nodded to show that he remembered, then let her go on. "You wouldn't mind telling me about it, would you?" The strange thing she asked made him raise an eyebrow. He wasn't sure what that had to do with them trying to figure out Naruto's secret. He finally asked, "What does this have to do with anything?" "Trust me," Sakura said. "I'll tell you after you tell me what had happened." He sighed in defeat as he remembered the whole battle and told her everything he could think of. He did make sure not to let her talk to Naruto about him telling Naruto about his brother, though. Aside from that, the Uchiha didn't miss a beat in his story. Sakura was trying to understand what she was hearing, so she kept quiet for a long time. No matter what happened when the dark chakra filled the bridge, her teammate was out like a light during the whole thing. "Okay, this is what happened while you were out," she said as she took a deep breath to start telling him what had happened while he was out. She then told me everything. She said that the air itself felt empty and lifeless, and that it was like I had to beg someone who wasn't there for forgiveness. Sasuke's eyes stayed wide as the story was told. He still couldn't believe what had happened. The Uchiha heir sat there for a minute trying to make sense of everything while Sakura wrote down all the strange things that had happened. She had decided that the strange feelings on the bridge could be another piece to the puzzle that was their mysterious teammate. So far, the strange chakra on the bridge that no one saw, Naruto wearing goggles, his avoiding his team like the plague, except Kakashi, and his strange behavior were the only things that gave them any ideas. Sakura looked over what she had written and tried to put it all together. She had to say that this was the worst algebra problem she had ever seen. That has something to do with the goggles and the strange chakra, right? Next, it hit her. It was something out of the blue, but it was still a very real possibility. Sasuke-kun, this is a long shot, but I have an idea that would explain some things, she said with nervousness. He looked up from his thoughts because he couldn't wait to hear what she had to say. "Well, what is it?" She took a deep breath as she got ready to talk. "Is it possible that Naruto could have developed a bloodline limit of some kind, a Dojutsu to be precise? I mean, that would explain a lot about the goggles and the weird chakra." When she said that, Sasuke's eyes grew wide in surprise. That was not possible for the Dobi to develop something out of the blue. It had to be. His goal was to be the only one on the team with a limit. If Naruto had one, it would give him an advantage, which he did not want at all. Even though it hurt him to say it, it made sense. It did make sense, but what kind of limit did the blonde have if she did have something? He said out loud, "We need to take those goggles off." He went back to the clearing where Sasuke set his behind on fire to train. He took off his glasses to see his silvery pupils. He looked around to make sure no one was there. He broke his eyes by adding chakra, which made the broken mirror. Like Iris's work. He had one last thought and then wished for his Sharingan to appear. Immediately, the shards fell out of his eyes. Again, he remembered that at Haku and Zabuza's hideout, it took his red eyes exactly 7 seconds to show up, but this time it happened right away. A shrug of his shoulders and he pushed the thought to the back of his mind. He then called his clones. He thought he saw a lot of pinwheel eyes when he looked at them, but none of them had the Kyokugen at all, not even the silvery pupils. "Hey, why don't you guys have the Kyokugen?" That he asked of no one in particular. The blondes looked at each other and then at the leader with surprised looks on their faces. They all shrugged their shoulders and looked confused. Someone among the clones said, "I think it's just something else you need to ask Gigi." "Well, whatever. Get me." All 100 of the clones charged at their master with a loud battle cry. Using his Sharingan, Naruto was having the time of his life. He had a strange feeling of deja vu every time one of the clones tried to attack him, but he quickly fought back before any of his little dreams came true. He could now understand why Sasuke was so proud of the Sharingan. It was so cool. In an instant, being able to see things happen before they did was so cool. He could see why an enemy ninja would be afraid of such a cap. He laughed to himself as he dodged a punch because he knew that his limit could make people even more scared. Even though the Sharingan could copy jutsu, his eyes could also copy limits. This made him even more dangerous. He was free to take the Sharingan and anything else that was out there. He was open to all kinds of options. After 4 painful minutes of taijutsu, Naruto finally gave up and fell to the ground, gasping for air. Even though the Sharingan could read attacks, it could only do what it could see. The army of clones then learned how to attack his weak spots, which made him very angry. That was something he would remember when he fought Sasuke. After a while, he could hear Kakashi's voice breaking through the trees. "So that's what your limit does." The scarecrow jumped from one of the trees and helped Naruto sit down while he looked at the Sharingan that was spinning in front of his eyes. The main thing that was different was the mirror. Like pupils. "So, the Sharingan can copy jutsu, but your eyes can evidently copy other bloodline limits?" While he was still trying to calm down, Naruto slowly nodded his head. "That is absolutely amazing. This limit has never been heard of before. Now I get why you want to keep it a secret. A lot of ninjas would want it." "Yeah," the blonde said slowly. The scary thing asked, "How many limits have you copied?" "2. Sharingan and Hyouden," Naruto proudly said, finally able to control his breathing. "Right now, I was just training my Sharingan and was going to finally try out Hyouden for the first time after I was done." "Can you turn off your eyes?" Naruto did what he was told and stopped giving his eyes chakra. The red eyes stopped spinning and were replaced with irises that were broken. He quickly blinked, and the pieces fell out of his eyes, turning them back to clear. "I see, if you stop feeding your eyes chakra, the limit will no longer work at all. It looks like some bloodline limits need to be still to be used," Kakashi said to himself more than to Naruto. "Hey. Is it okay for me to train with Hyouden now?" The blonde asked, eager to finally see what his friend could do. After taking a moment to think, Kakashi smiled and said, "Oh, sorry. Yes, please do. As long as I can watch." Naruto said it was okay, so the older man could sit on one of the trees above while he leaned on the trunk and watched. It was amazing that there was such a limit, but it was also dangerous. A lot of countries would want to steal it just because it was so cool. Naruto was once again the most unpredictable ninja in the world, and he got a new skill that many people would kill for. To use his other limit, the blonde was about to break his eyes, but he felt something in the back of his mind, like someone was nearby. When he looked at his sensei, he could feel some kind of signature coming from the eye that was covered. "Ida, this might sound a little strange. I believe I can feel your left eye, though." The scary crow did nothing but blink in shock. "How's that possible?" The blonde replied, "I don't know, I could just feel it." While he thought about it, Kakashi put his hand to his chin. He could feel his eye, but not him. This made him wonder why he couldn't feel the Hitaki white chakra, which was a limit. But this could have meant that some kind of sixth sense was. Naruto's eyes slowly got bigger as he became aware of Kakashi. The eye and the scarecrow's body, on the other hand, felt very differently. "Naruto, can you sense me?" The blonde looked at the man and moved his head back and forth as he tried to figure out how he felt. He felt like the wiry man and him knew each other in some way. "I thought that too. You're not sensing me. You're sensing the limits of my bloodline. You have a bloodline limit. Kakashi gave a head nod. Yes, I do. One is from my dad's side of the family and the other is from Obito. I'm going to take a chance and say that your eyes can pick up on other bloodline limits. A way to copy as many limits as possible, if you will. As Naruto looked at him for a while, he tried to take it all in before his mind wandered to something else. Would I be able to copy yours? As soon as the former Anbu heard what his student had to say, his eyebrows went into his hairline. Did the blonde just ask if he could copy his bloodline limit when he was already allowed to do so? Why do you want to know? In an interested tone, he said, you know you don't have to. Naruto just started to smirk and rub the back of his head. Well, I just want to be rude like Teme and copy everything without asking first. That's very nice of you. Of course you have my permission. Kakashi was really shocked when Naruto showed up. He had no idea that he would ask to copy something. It did show that Sasuke and he were very different people, for one thing. Naruto wanted to get stronger, while Sasuke was happy to copy things just for fun in order to get revenge on his family. So small. That's 3. Naruto yelled while jumping around. He then calmed down and smiled in a curious way. So, what does it do? This is called the Byakuya chakra. The chakra is one of a kind and is white. It has a lot of different powers. Remember when I fought Zabuza? Naruto bobbed his head back and forth again because he was happy. It was so easy for his sword to cut through my kunai, but it didn't. That's because I put a very thin layer of it on my kunai. Alright, let me show you how it works. As he did this, Kakashi took out one of his kunai and began to give it a white aura with a small amount of his own chakra. The blonde then watched as his sensei threw the kunai at a tree in a lazy way. It went through the tree's trunk and then through the rock behind it, stopping on the trunk of another tree behind the rock. What the? Naruto asked with wide eyes. It's easy. The kunai was sharpened to a very high level. It would have gone through at least 5 more trees before it stopped if I had thrown it harder. Because Byakuya chakra is denser than normal chakra, it takes a lot less of it to do any jutsu. And to be honest, my reserves aren't as big as they should be for a Junin. That's because my chakra is denser. It needs even less chakra for even stronger moves. Naruto exclaimed with joy. That's correct. It has other, more mysterious features that not even I have figured out yet. I'll tell you about those later. Are you going to copy the limit then? With a smile still on his face, Naruto nodded. Then he broke his eyes again and looked at Kakashi for a second. It was a great feeling. As Naruto stared at the man, he could feel his eyes working as he copied the limit and added it to his growing collection of skills. He felt a click in the back of his mind that told him he had copied the limit. The blonde smiled. The boy gave his teacher a thumbs up and said, "Got it. Great. I'll start teaching you later, but right now I think you should work on your Hyouden. I'm going to sit down and check out how things work." The blonde then closed his eyes to help him focus on making the ability happen. He finally opened his eyes to let the shards fall to the ground. Though as he felt them slowly drift out of his eyes, he looked confused, just like when he went to the hideout. After 7 seconds, he had Haku's dark eyes. Kakashi paid close attention to everything. He thought he had found a major weakness in the Kyokugen, but he needed to test it to be sure. That would have to wait though. Naruto just shrugged it off again and walked over to the pond to try out his limit for the first time. He put out his arm and thought about Haku's notes. Then he slowly let his chakra soak into the water. He finally used it to move, and as he did, he smiled as a small water tentacle began to coil its way into the air. Naruto then pushed it toward him, which split the water he was controlling from the pond. With a smile, he put it between his hands and watched as it moved and twisted like clay. Now it got hard. I had to try to freeze it. The scroll helped him remember that Hyouden was the combination of wind and water chakra, but he had no idea how to control elemental chakra. He just settled down and grimaced as he pushed more chakra into the water, which caused it to explode in his face and soak him completely. The blonde yelled, "It's not funny." When Kakashi laughed. It was from where I stood. Anyway, Kakashi said, "If this is an elemental bloodline limit, then all that's left is to combine the 2 chakras." The blonde said in a low voice, "It's not as easy as it looks." That's right. It is one of the hardest ways to train, but if you know how to use elemental chakra manipulations like Hyouden or Mokuton, it should be easy for you.
All that needs to be done is to separate the chakra and then put it back together outside of the body. Try again, but this time split the chakra in half. Naturally, Naruto frowned and agreed. His sensei told him to focus on splitting the chakra, so he did that again. He willed some water to fill his palms. The chakras felt very different to him when he did that. His eyes got a little bigger. During his work, he could feel the water chakra in the liquid and the wind chakra in the air around him. He pushed the wind chakra into the water, which made it freeze into a perfect sphere shape. He smiled as he held it in the air. He had just learned how to do the limit properly. Yahoo! Naruto was about to jump for joy, but the ice ball hit the ground because he wasn't paying attention. It hit the ground right next to Naruto's foot. A blonde boy let out a loud yell and started to hop on one foot while cradling the limb. Kakashi couldn't help but laugh as he saw his student hop on one foot and swear at the sky with words that would have made a boat full of sailors blush with shame. He should have had a camera. The Junin stopped laughing when he saw that the sun was a quarter of the way across the sky, which meant it was time for dinner. He then told Naruto what he had seen. "Naruto, I think it's time for dinner. But before we go home, would you mind if I test something with your eyes?" The blonde stopped dancing on one foot and turned to look at his teacher. "No problem, but what do you want me to do?" "Oh, it's simple really. Just use the Sharingan again." Naruto nodded and broke both of his eyes, turning his iris back into the broken mirrors. He willed his eyes to change like the last time, but to Kakashi and Naruto's surprise, the pieces didn't fall out all at once like they usually do. Instead, they sparkled like snow falling in the sun. After 16 seconds, the Sharingan was moving in his eyes. "What the hell?" At that moment, Kakashi spoke up and cut Naruto off. "I thought that too. We think we've found a major weakness in the Kyokugen." "And what's that?" "Before you can use any of your limits, your body needs to get used to the changes that each one needs. My Sharingan doesn't work right because, among other things, I don't have the memory or frontal lobes that the Uchiha do. To make up for this, I need to use a lot of chakra. You, on the other hand, use the limits like you've had them your whole life. But because your body has to change, it gets tired faster between changes, so it takes longer between changes." If this is true, the copycat said, so when you first use Kyokugen and turn into a limit, it happens right away because your body is clean. After that, you get one instant change into another limit. But even after that, from what I've seen, it goes from 7 seconds to 16 seconds. I think it would take somewhere over 30 seconds for a fourth change after that. Remember that this could be dangerous, because in the world of shinobi, a few seconds could mean the difference between life and death. As little as possible should be changed while in battle. Find at least 3 limits for each situation and stick to them. Try to change them as little as possible. Naruto said, "Okay," but he was still trying to understand what he was hearing. "That's all and good, but how do I restart the time thingy?" "Of course rest," Kakashi said with a shrug. "It must be hard on the body to change your body all of a sudden. We should go to dinner now that I've made this clear, before everyone starts to wonder." The boy gave the teacher a nod, and the two of them started walking back home. But the blonde made sure he grabbed his backpack before he forgot it. As Naruto and Kakashi, who always seems to be late, walked into the house, Sakura yelled, "You two are late." With the help of his new sixth sense, Naruto could feel Sasuke sitting at the table. This made him smile. When he got home, he quickly went upstairs to put his backpack with the rest of his stuff before going back downstairs to join Tezuna's family for dinner. Kakashi's weak excuse was, "Sorry, we both just got lost on the road of life." They both rolled their eyes at their teacher for being late all the time and quickly went back to their half-eaten dinner. Naruto quickly joined everyone else and put a lot of food on his plate. It's interesting that Inari kept an eye on the Haruno and Uchiha with suspicion. He knew they hadn't made any new plans yet, but he wasn't going to let them get away with anything. It was time for Sasuke to carry out his last plan, see. He had been working on this plan without Sakura's consort for a while, but they hadn't talked about their third plan together. He couldn't let this plan fail because if he did, everyone in the village would think he was stupid. It's always better the third time around, right? Naruto, the blonde said, looking up from his food to see Sasuke wearing his famous smirk of superiority. Want to make a bet? Did what he thought he heard come through? He and Sasuke were betting on something? I couldn't pass up the chance. I'm in. Let's hear it, the blonde said with a smile. Me and Sakura against you in a fight. It felt like Sakura's drink went up her nose. She coughed up everything that went down the wrong tube and then looked at her teammates with wide eyes. What the hell was Sasuke up to now, and how did she fit into it? Naruto smiled and said, okay. But Sakura thought she was going crazy when she saw his pupils glowing through his goggles. What's in it for me? I teach you one of my own jutsu. Oh, maybe the fire release, grand fireball technique. Okay, I like what I'm hearing so far. But you have to take off your goggles if I win. Naruto's smile turned into a mean scowl very quickly. Sasuke would be a huge pile of puke if looks could kill. It was such a big bet that Kakashi put down his book to wait for his student to answer. This weed was both a miracle vine from heaven and hell. If Naruto lost, bad things would happen. Sakura's eyes got really big when she realized Sasuke's third plan. He was ready to take a chance and hurt Naruto's pride to get him to say something. She thought it was brilliant, but she didn't think her blonde teammate would even come close to winning because of Sasuke's Sharingan. Both Sakura and Sasuke, though, saw this as proof that Naruto was hiding something behind those glasses. During the fight with Haku, did Naruto really reach some kind of bloodline limit? Naruto also thought about the chances. He could use 3 limits, but he wasn't fully skilled in 2 of them yet. Even though it was 2 against 1, he explained why Sakura didn't have any really bad jutsu. At the moment, the odds were being checked against a scale. He didn't care much about the fire jutsu, even though it was cool. He wouldn't hold back just because Sakura was on his side. What mattered most was being able to cover Sasuke's face in dirt. Everything was fair in love and war. When and where, prick? Naruto looked like he meant business when he asked. Sakura's eyes got bigger when she heard Naruto bite the bait. But Kakashi just let out a sigh. He was once again yelling at his students for being too competitive. Sasuke kept grinning because he thought his plan was working. Tomorrow at noon near the spot that Sensei trained us to climb trees. I guess this means that I'm going to have to cancel team practice tonight, said Kakashi. Just 2 bites into Naruto's dinner, and he was done. He then ran upstairs to get his trusty backpack again. Before he could fight, he had to learn at least 1 or 2 Hyouden moves. Sasuke asked in a mean voice, "Where are you going?" "To get ready." "What else, jerk?" The Uchiha frowned, but Naruto smiled like a witch as he put salt on the wound. "I would set you ass on fire, but it seems someone beat me to it." When Sasuke saw the blonde leave without stopping, his frown turned into an angry grimace. When he pushed the blonde into the ground in the fight tomorrow, he would get even. Sasuke-kun, the boy in question said to Sakura, who looked nervous. "You wouldn't mind training me a bit tonight, would you?" The boy with dark hair nodded his head to show that he agreed. She had to get stronger right now because she was a danger on the field if she didn't. Kakashi did see the rivalry between his students as a mixed blessing as he watched them talk to each other. They got stronger quickly because of it, but it was really annoying. He only hoped Naruto could keep up, because he knew Sakura would be very dangerous after Sasuke was done with her. Inari was so mad that he shook a hornet's nest. His older brother figure told him not to get in the way of the Uchiha's plan this time, so he couldn't. He was happy just to watch and hope Naruto won. Kakashi let out another sigh as he left dinner to go work on his thoughts on the roof. He had a lot to talk about. People could find Naruto staring up at the sky while lying on the grass in the clearing. He was wearing no glasses. The moon, which was getting smaller, and the stars in the midnight sky made for a beautiful sight. As he looked up into the sky, the moonlight was softly reflecting off of his silvery pupils. He was calm. He wouldn't mind showing off his beautiful eyes right now. The blonde didn't have to put on the mask like he usually did. It wasn't necessary here. Not to worry, he had a 2-on-1 match in a few hours against Sakura and Sasuke, and he had just learned the Hyouden Jutsu he wanted. While they were interested in what was behind the goggles, he was only after the thrill of victory in Sasuke's face. But that didn't bother him right now. He only wanted a break for his body so that he could be at his best for the battle. He hoped it would be easy for him to change into the other limits he got. Even though he knew he didn't want to, he slowly forced his sore body to get up and train more. Naruto wanted to learn how to use the water release, water guillotine, but it took a lot of practice. You would be glad you worked hard for the ability to cut an enemy in half in the end. As Sakura took a break, she looked down at her tender, hurt hands. While she was looking up, she felt someone pour water on them, which helped ease some of her pain. As he poured water from the bottle, Sasuke stood over her and put the cap back on it. You should be a little more careful with that move, or your hands will get worse, the boy with black hair told him. His training for fire release, dragon fire technique was over, so he decided to take a break and sit down next to her. His teammate with pink hair was also practicing a new fire move that he knew. Because her chakra reserves were so low, it was the only thing he could teach her without making her too tired to learn. She asked out of the blue, "Do you think we'll win?" With a calm smile, Sasuke looked at her. "How can we not lose? Unless Dobi throws something out there we don't know about, the battle should be pretty easy." "Yeah, I guess, but what if we're both right and he does throw out this random bloodline limit?" "Don't know. We'll just have to adapt when it comes," the Uchiha said with a shrug. But seriously, what could it be? They both sat there quietly and thought about it. Naruto had to have a limit, but what was it? What could it do? The question could go in so many different directions that the two stopped thinking about it hours ago. Sasuke slowly stood up and said, "Okay, let's get back to work. This time, let's put out the fire. Don't hold it, or your hands will get worse." Sakura said, "Yes," and quickly joined him. While the other member of Team 7 trained, the other member got into a basic battle stance. They had to get ready for their fight with Naruto since it was almost morning. Before morning came, Kakashi sat on the roof of the house. If another Junin had gotten close enough, they would have been shocked that the man wasn't looking at his sexy book. "I really couldn't relax because I had too much to think about." He thought about the Kyokugen for a lot of the night. It was a great limit that most people would have a hard time beating. A lot of people would want those eyes, and they might steal them or marry someone they don't want to. The clans of Konoha would be trying to get their hands on them, which is why arranged marriages would happen. Since the Yanamaka clan had a girl about Naruto's age, the Scarecrow was sure that someone from that family would try to attack. He wasn't sure about the Hyuga clan, but he was sure that the elders would try to get it. There were more, but he didn't think they would have as loud of a voice. Then there was the Kyokugen. Just the basic skills were cool, like being able to copy other limits and sense people who have a limit. That being said, it also had some bad points. Naruto had some skill with each limit, and he would have to train with each one more before he was fully skilled in them. The eyes could only use one limit at a time, and the blonde could only switch limits 3 times before it became dangerous because of time limits. It was also not possible for his clones to use, which was a major problem. In a way, these problems made up for the good things about the Kyokugen. On the surface, it looks like a miracle vine, but its flaws make it a weed from hell. In time, though, it could become a very strong weapon. Finally, there was Naruto's mind. Said about everything. The blonde saw his Sharingan as a powerful gift that should not be abused, while Sasuke saw it as a way to get revenge. Someone told him he could copy the Byaku chakra, but he didn't need to ask. It just showed how different they were as people. He let out a sigh as he looked up at the horizon and saw the rainbow of colors slowly painting the sky, a sign that morning was coming. Before the battle, he had to keep an eye on it to make sure no one got hurt. He jumped off the roof and went inside to get some coffee after that last thought. Around 8 o'clock, Sakura and Sasuke walked up to the house to get breakfast. Before they fought their blonde teammate, they had to eat something. If they didn't, it would be like the bell test again. The Kunoichi with the green eyes learned how to use fire the way Sasuke chose to teach her. It was simple, but it was the best he could do for her given how little money she had. She wasn't even close to being as strong as Naruto's chakra, and she didn't think she could do half as many attacks as Sasuke, but she got by. Their sensei said to both of them, "Ah, I see you guys came in for breakfast. Have you seen Naruto yet?" Sasuke asked as he sat down at the table. Soon after, Sakura joined him. Kakashi confirmed with a nod of the head. Yes, as a matter of fact he was here about an hour ago to eat, but he quickly went back to his favorite clearing to train some more. With a nod, Sasuke dug into his food. A lot of training and not getting enough sleep had made both of them tired. That's why they both decided to take it easy before going to the clearing where the fight would happen. At the other end of the table, Inari was giving Haruno and Uchiha the death glare.
It wasn't possible for him to just ruin the battle, or his fake big brother would get mad. He really wanted to see Naruto fight, though, so he couldn't just come watch. Okay, I guess I should be a good sensei and teach my students some things, the copycat said as he put his fork and spoon on the plate that was now empty. This caught Sasuke and Sakura's attention right away. What did they need to know about their blonde teammate that they already knew? He mostly used taijutsu and only used the shadow clone technique. They did agree that Naruto could make great plans at the last minute, but only if he could calm down and think something through. I imagine you're wondering why I'm doing this, said the clone, but let me be the first to say that Naruto has experienced a spike in strength ever since his battle with the fake hunter. Nin. My only advice is to not underestimate him, or otherwise you'll lose. Sasuke asked with a frown, how has he gotten stronger? This didn't sound good. Kakashi pondered it for a moment before he told him, training. Lots and lots of training. I do believe he added another jutsu to his arsenal, but I can't be sure of that one. But again I say, don't underestimate your opponent. That is the quickest deciding factor in shinobi battles. Keep that in mind and you'll do great. It shouldn't be a problem, Sasuke said with a grin. I mean, I do have my Sharingan and Sakura has learned a new technique. That was all the Scarecrow could do, shake his head in frustration. True, the Sharingan is a powerful tool. But nonetheless, you should not take it for granted. Get cocky and you're going to lose. Naruto gets it. It didn't take him long. The copy. Cat thought, he found it on his own, I didn't even have to tell him. Sasuke, I guess you need to learn how to be humble. It's too bad people think you're smarter than Naruto. He has surely learned more than you. He got up from the table and said, now that I've given you my advice, I'm going to find Naruto and give him some that he might need. Shoko asked, why are you helping both sides? For a moment, Kakashi put his hand to his face and thought about it. Because you're all my students and I want to give you all equal chances. Now, if you'll excuse me, I will be heading to talk to Naruto. Oh, and relax or otherwise you'll burn out your bodies before the fight. They both nodded as he walked away. She went to her room to take a nap, and Sasuke did the same thing after they were done eating. In silence, Naruto sat down with his legs crossed and looked at the pond in front of him with a look that seemed like irritation. For the past 2 hours, he had been practicing the water release, water guillotine. It would have been an understatement to say that it was easy to learn. The water that was needed to cut things had to be very sharp. Otherwise, all that would happen is that the opponent would get wet. For Naruto to be able to sharpen the guillotine's edges, he needed to have very good chakra control. It was said that they could be sharpened to the point where they could cut a metal kunai in half, but it was still hard to control. In spite of this, the blonde kept going all night to get it. He knew the basics, but it was killing him to keep getting better. You look like you had a good night, the copycat said as he entered the clearing. Naruto smiled as he looked up, but his smile quickly turned into an angry scowl as he looked back at the water. I've been trying to get this water jutsu down, but I can't sharpen the edges, said Naruto. Kakashi sat down next to him and said, could you tell me what technique it is? I might be able to help you. It's called water release, water guillotine, but like I said, I can't sharpen it. Sounds like a good move. Never quite heard of it though. That's because Haku invented it before he died. It's a B class jutsu. As he heard about the attack, the thin man let out a low whistle. It was clear that the attack worked very well, and it sounded good too. That makes sense, Kakashi said to get the attention of his student. You would probably need to know the water walking exercise before you master it. If it's a Junin class attack, it would need equal control, but I doubt you'll be able to learn it in a couple hours. He hung his head as he thought about what he had to do. The attack looked like it was just out of reach, but he would get it in the end. Kakashi asked, so, what are you going to do during the fight? Naruto gave him a quick look while he thought. He was too busy training to think of an attack plan, but he should have now that he thought about it. But he did make a promise to himself. I don't want to use the Sharingan, the blonde said in a firm voice. When the Hitaki looked at his student, he raised an eyebrow. Why would that be? You copied it, therefore you should use it. The sun. Kissed Boy replied with another scowl, yeah, but it's Sasuke's and I don't want to fight that jerk. So, I'm just going to assume that you're going to use Hyouden and Byaku Chakra. For sure,
I'll use Hyouden. I don't know about the Byaku chakra, mostly because I don't know how to fully use it, Naruto told his teacher with hopeful eyes. You wouldn't mind teaching me to use it, would you? When he heard him, Kakashi smiled behind his mask. The thing he loved most about teaching Naruto was that he was always willing to learn something new, even if it was just another lesson or a different form of jutsu. The Scarecrow could have told the blonde about this to the academy when she was there, and they might have held the boy back and slowed his growth. If this was true, Naruto might have been as good as Sasuke just by having the talent to be good. Which is another reason he took in everything he was taught so quickly. Kakashi stood up and put his hands in his pockets. No, I don't mind, he said. But you need to go through a few quick lessons without using your limit. If you don't, you'll lose your chance to switch limits in battle, and we don't want that. Okay, what are you going to teach me? Naruto asked with a sly grin. He stood up right away and waited for the lesson. His teacher looked at him and smiled at how excited the boy was. Well, for starters, I'll be honest and say that I don't use it often because it messes with my Sharingan, which might be good for you with your battle with Sasuke and Sakura. Also partly because my reserves are small. But this shouldn't be a problem for you because of your naturally high reserves thanks to the Kyuubi. The blonde asked again, okay, I can see some of that. But what are you supposed to do? Well, continued the former Anbu leader, Byaku chakra is a very taijutsu-oriented limit. You constantly have to saturate the air with it, but by doing so, you allow a whole different form of hand. 2. Hand combat. This also gives you a larger sense of touch as people within the range of the saturated air can be sensed, whether or not you're looking at them. Let me give you a demonstration. Naruto watched as his teacher did something. He went over to a nearby tree and took his hands out of his pockets. Right away, the blonde could feel the chakra fill the air and center on his teacher. Then he got very angry when Kakashi punched the tree lightly but not touching it. The side of the tree broke off in less than a second, leaving a hole about a foot wide. How the blonde asked in shock. Chakra displacement, Kakashi said in response to the unfinished question. I gathered the chakra I placed in the air into my fist and released it, but it released so fast that I smashed the tree. As Naruto watched his teacher move 10 feet away and punch again, gathering chakra in the air, he became even more shocked. Then he heard a punch that broke some of the tree's bark. It wasn't nearly as bad as the last attack, but it was still interesting to see. For example, Kakashi put his hands back in his pockets and said, as you can see, I can send punches through the air up to about 10 feet. But as you saw, the attack was about the same as if I were going to normally attack someone. The closer you are, the more damage you do. At the same time, his body turned into a black hole that sucked in all the white chakra that was floating around. When will I be able to learn that? Naruto asked with a huge grin that almost cut his face in half. I'm afraid you won't be able to learn it for a while, his teacher told the blonde boy. She quickly turned his smile into an angry face as she spoke. Byaku chakra is actually difficult to control because it's so much denser than normal chakra. As a matter of fact, if you used it, your chakra capacity may even triple. I would teach you this now, but the control this requires is comparable to the Hyuga Juken. Then why show me all that cool stuff if I can't learn it now? Naruto asked with a scratch on his head. I wanted to give you an example, but I also wanted you to try and use the chakra saturation that you saw. It's just a matter of you continually releasing it into the air. And, like I said before, it can mess over some Dojutsu and make it to where the Sharingan can't fully copy things. Got that? His pupil quickly moved his head back and forth. Even though it was a lot to take in, seeing the Byaku chakra in action was amazing. He was excited to use it against his rival. Now that I've given you your hint like your other teammates, I'm going to go and relax for the rest of the time. Good luck with the water jutsu. With his little orange book in his hand, Naruto watched as his sensei walked out of the clearing. He quickly went back to his water jutsu, but it was still hard for him to make the water curtain sharper. Sasuke and Sakura walked slowly to the clearing where they agreed to meet everyone at 12 o'clock. The time went by too quickly. They walked into it and saw Naruto already there. He was sitting on a rock with his legs crossed and his famous fox grin on his face. You still up to this, Dobi? Sasuke asked with his smug look of superiority on his face. Naruto put on a serious face that he had only seen when he was ready to fight, like when they were going to fight the fake hunter. Nin.
The blonde yelled from across the clearing, "I'd eat my own sandals before I gave up on you." When Kakashi showed up in the clearing with a puff of smoke, everyone turned around. It was strange to see him not with his nose in his famous book. But he had to be serious for this. The feared Sharingan was up against the Bloodline Limit Kyokugan, which copied other limits. He needed to be. At that moment, Kakashi spoke from across the clearing. "Okay, I want a fair, clean match. Anything goes, but there will be no killing. If I think things are getting out of hand, I will step in. Now, it's a 2-on-1 match with Naruto going up against Sasuke and Sakura. Are you ready?" Naruto nodded, and with a quick spike of chakra, he broke out of his eyes. He still wasn't sure which limit he would start with, but he was going to fight, even though the girl he liked was one of his enemies at the moment. Just like Naruto, Sasuke used his Dojutsu, and Sakura threw a kunai. They had a rough plan before they got to the clearing, but a lot of things could change it. Their teacher yelled, "Begin." That was Naruto. He jumped backwards and did his favorite hand seal at the same time. 10 copies of the Uchiha and Haruno then showed up and started charging at them after another second. While Sakura cut at them with her knife, Sasuke used the Sharingan to track them all and start his own attack. After 30 seconds, the clones were destroyed. They then quickly turned their attention to their teammate, giving him time to choose what to use. Naruto could feel the shards falling out of his eyes, which meant that the limit was on, but no one else could see because of the goggles. Even Kakashi didn't understand what he had picked out. The blonde did another hand seal and made at least 20 copies, which started a new wave of attacks. The two got tired of taijutsu this time and started to do hand seals together. Sakura was the first one to finish. Fire release, Ember shot. Sasuke had also finished his. Fire release, Immortal Phoenix Flame. The kunoichi with pink hair started to throw small fireballs from her palms, while Sasuke used his mouth to throw even bigger, faster flames. All of the clones were quickly destroyed by the combined attack, but Naruto kept making more of them. The blonde finally thought it was time to show off his new move to everyone. Naruto went through 6 hand seals, and Sasuke smiled as he watched. But his smile quickly faded when his Sharingan saw how the jutsu worked but wouldn't let him copy it. What the heck? What is going on? In his mind, Sasuke yelled in confusion. Naruto quickly gave him the answer he was looking for after taking a deep breath: ice release, frostbite. When the blonde hairs blew outward, they made an icy wind that quickly covered everything it touched in a very thin layer of ice. It put out the fires they started quickly, making them back off out of safety. Naruto quickly moved through them again and breathed out another icy wind, which made them jump to the side to avoid it. Sasuke-kun. When that boy heard his name, he turned around and saw Sakura holding her left arm. He saw a thin layer of frost slowly moving up the side of her arm. It covered the arm and made her skin turn pale. She had the bad luck to be hit at the end of the attack. She yelled at him with wide eyes, "My arm is numb. I can't move it." As Sasuke turned to attack Naruto again, his anger was starting to burn. But before he could even start the hand seals for another attack, his blonde teammate finished another set. While he was standing, another cold wind hit the area, and everything that it touched got a thin layer of frost. Sakura tried to keep her teammate busy for a short time so that her partner could finish some hand seals. Then she quickly started hitting Naruto with her good arm while holding a kunai. The blonde saw what was going to happen and pulled out his own knife to block all the attacks. It wasn't enough, though, as a few got through and cut him a few times. Fire release, Grand Fireball technique. Naruto quickly went through all of his own hand seals. Ice release, frostbite. Fire and ice clashed as they hit each other straight on. Extreme heat and freezing cold pushed against each other and threatened to take over. Sakura took her chance when she hid behind the Jinchuriki while they played tug of war. She hit him again, but this time with shuriken in the hopes of getting lucky. She didn't waste her time because Naruto got hit with a few stars, which made him lose focus. The blonde quickly left the ship and jumped out of the way to avoid getting burned. Sasuke, who was being attacked, smiled as he felt another Tomoe go into his eyes. Things were about to get interesting. Once the Jinchuriki touched down, he did his favorite hand seal, which made even more copies of himself while he watched and planned. They were quickly killed when Sasuke started hitting the clones hard with fireballs and Sakura used her kunai to blow up tags on them, making a few craters. As another gust of cold air hit them, they jumped out of the way. But Sasuke was clenching his teeth as he felt his foot go numb. As soon as he landed, he tripped, but Sakura was there to protect him, throwing fireballs at him while she felt her arm again. As the girl with pink hair attacked Naruto, he made a copy of himself. Right away, the clone grabbed its creator and threw him into the air. Naruto did his favorite hand seal again, making several clones that flew into the air and dove at Sakura. He finished his hand seals and sent another firestorm at the human missiles coming at her. Her partner was already by her side. These clones were able to get through the blasts and start to attack the boy with the black hair in taijutsu. His new Tomoe made his Sharingan even better at blocking the attacks though. He quickly lost his sense of victory when a couple of the blonde boy's punches hit him in the back and made him stumble. He quickly rounded on them and hit them several times to finish them off. The Uchiha looked away and ran to help Sakura when she was thrown to the ground. He quickly grabbed a pair of kunai and threw them at the clones, but they were able to avoid them. He smiled, though, as he moved the stars with wires that were almost invisible. The stars hit a lot of the clones and disappeared with a puff of smoke. One of them even hit the real thing. He quickly took advantage of the chance and sent another large fireball at the blonde. When it hit, the flames broke apart, and his enemy started to fight back with another cold wind. Naruto didn't understand why the attack stopped all of a sudden, but he did when Sakura walked up to him and cut him with her knife. That thing did cut him on the hand, but not too badly. His teammate was hurt because some of the blood that came out of the wound hit her in the eyes and made her yell in pain. Naruto yelled, "Sakura! Chan!" as he saw her fall back and frantically rub her eyes off. Kakashi yelled, "Stop the match for a second," as he walked up to her. Sasuke stopped, but he did it with a mean grunt, and Naruto held his lightly bleeding hand and looked on with worry. As the Kyuubi's chakra poured into the wound, it was already starting to heal. Sakura's eyes were bloodshot when Kakashi told her to open them. He quickly began to wash her eyes with the water bottle he took out of his pouch. He felt his eye open wider when he saw red spots on her irises after getting the blood out. After a second, they faded into the bright green eyes that they usually have. Something wasn't quite right about that. He quickly looked at the worried members of Team 7. Sakura can no longer fight for reasons out of our hands. Continue the fight when I say. They both agreed and watched as the only woman on Team 7 walked next to her teacher while rubbing her eyes badly. She did this while sitting down on the boulder next to Kakashi. "Alright, start over," said the copycat. Sasuke has already sped up and thrown himself at Naruto. His goal was for those goggles to fall off, even if Sakura wasn't there. He was not going to let the Dobi win. When Naruto saw his enemy coming at him, he made more copies of himself and charged at him. The Uchiha stopped charging when he saw the Sharingan and started killing clones as they got close. But the blondes were gone in a flash, and the real one fired off another ice release, Frostbite. Sasuke wasn't going to let the attack go. He shot several fireballs at the wind, slowing it down before it could cover him in ice. He did this by flashing through his own hand seals. As soon as his first attack was over, he finished another set of seals and breathed out another huge fireball that pushed back the icy wind. However, a clone he summoned knocked his target out of the way before he could hit him. Naruto landed far away, and Sasuke shot up into the air and threw more shuriken. The blonde smiled as he watched them all go around him. The blonde stopped as he was tied to a nearby tree and said, "Ha! Your aim is so bad." Ack. As he did a quick set of hand seals and tightened the wires, Sasuke smiled. Someone on his team knew he was in trouble when they saw the fire on the wires getting worse. It was his one chance to do this right. If something went wrong, he would be toast like a toad on an open fire. The Kyokugen user broke his eyes and took out the stormy colored irises that Hyouten users have. He also changed the color of his eyes to look like those of a Byaku chakra user. To fight back, the blonde pushed raw, white chakra into the wires and down towards the Uchiha at the other end. The fire had already gone halfway down the wires. Sasuke was shocked when a white chakra shot straight at him from behind the fire. He flew backwards as the raw chakra hit him, making the blonde's bonds loosen. It felt like an electric shock. Before Sasuke had time to heal, he quickly pulled out a shuriken and began to charge it with Byaku chakra. This made the weapon glow white. Naruto threw a weapon, and Sasuke stood up.
A normal throwing star would just whistle as it cuts through the air, but Naruto sounded like a buzzsaw gone crazy. Because he was scared, the boy with dark hair pulled out a kunai and blocked the star. But the weapon kept pushing into his weapon, sending him tumbling backwards. When the shuriken finally stopped, the friction made the weapon smoke, and his kunai was cut in half. 10 more of the crazy stars rushed past him, and he quickly jumped out of the way. He then had the brilliant idea to use a kunai instead. He did not cover the knife with white chakra like Kakashi did. Instead, he put the chakra into it. He quickly bent his knees backwards as Sasuke looked at Naruto. His Sharingan just barely caught a glimpse of some kind of weapon screaming past his face. The knife was shot into the side of the tree, which caused it to explode and spew splinters all over the area. Of course, the Maelstrom liked what he saw and pulled out all of his other kunai. Sasuke got back up just in time to jump into the air and avoid 9 white kunai that were whistling and leaving behind white chakra trails. The speed and force of the kunai made craters where they hit. A big fire release, Grand Fireball technique was Sasuke's last attack. When Naruto looked up, he saw him going through hand seals for it. The blonde knew what this meant, the battle was over, and it was time for one last attack. He quickly put as much chakra as he could into his last weapon, hoping that it would help him cut the fire and reach his goal like it did the last time. Kakashi knew what was going to happen and started to fear for the lives of his students. Before the last blows could be delivered, he used up all of his hand seals faster than the other two put together. When both boys looked to the left, a whistling wind gust hit the area and threw them into the trees. This made them lose focus on their attacks, letting the chakra that was charging them escape. They heard Kakashi's voice in the clearing before they could ask what had happened. Due to the threat of you two killing each other, I call this match a draw. In response, Naruto yelled, "Hey, I was about to win." Even though Sasuke didn't answer, he looked like he was ready to kill. Kakashi looked at them for a long time, trying to make them understand how dangerous they were. "I told you in the rules not to kill each other," the man with silver hair said in a harsh voice. "What you both were about to do would have, at the least, caused serious injury, or even worse. For that reason, I decided it was fit for me to intervene." Sasuke clenched his teeth in anger. He could almost taste victory. If they had given him one more second, he would have been able to see what was behind the goggles. Not so with Naruto. He knew what he almost did and began to hang his head in shame. If he had thrown that knife, it would have gone through the fire and probably killed Sasuke. So eager to win and show the Teme that he wasn't just dead last, he had lost control. Naruto said, "I'm sorry, Sensei," as he slowly stood up. "It's okay, but don't let this happen again," the thin man said in a softer voice. On the way home, it was quiet, but Sakura would growl and scratch her eyes when she was mad. The Uchiha heir kept thinking to himself on the way back. Naruto was putting a lot of chakra into the kunai, which they saw light up white. Would he have won if the other person had thrown that weapon? He saw white chakra that was strong enough to cut through the fire he sent down the wires. He took a big beating from it. The Dobi would have won if Naruto had thrown that knife. He clenched his teeth at the thought of losing to the last person in line. He would have won, and the village idiot would have been able to crush the Uchiha, who is the most powerful person in Konoha. That didn't address the unique ice move he saw the blonde use. He watched Naruto go through the hand seals many times, but he still couldn't copy it. That wasn't true. The Sharingan could copy almost anything that wasn't a bloodline. Now he understood. The blonde did have some kind of limit she could use. He felt awful now. The fact that Naruto and he had something in common with that didn't make him feel better. He agreed with Naruto being his rival right then, even though he didn't know it. It wasn't funny anymore. The blonde could fight him, as shown by their fight in the forest. He had to get stronger or this arms race would be over for him. When he heard Sakura cough, he turned around to see that she was beginning to look sick. Her eyes were cloudy, and her cheeks were turning pink, which meant she had a fever. Still, he wouldn't tell anyone, but he did feel a little something for her. During those plans to get Naruto to talk, she stuck with him. But when they trained that night, he really started to notice her. He saw a bit of her heart and knew she was more than the fangirl he knew. And he wouldn't tell anyone, but as he looked at her, he started to worry about her health.
He asked her without much thought, "Sakura, are you okay?"
"You're starting to look sick." "Yeah, I'm fine,"
but my eyes are killing me and giving me a headache, Sakura said. Even Kakashi looked at her with worry on his face. What made her sick all of a sudden? He had no idea, but he knew it wasn't good. Naruto said, "Sorry about getting some blood in your eyes." He looked upset. When they finally saw the house, everyone felt better. They were finally going to be able to rest after a long day. As soon as Sasuke and Naruto woke up, a simple water jutsu poured water on them both. The blonde in the group launched into a series of curses as he began to wring out his clothes. Sasuke quickly glanced at his teammate and saw that the maelstrom had once again slept in with his goggles on. Both boys looked at the bad guy, half thinking it might be Sakura. But to their surprise, a tired looking Kakashi stared at them with one eye. All he said was breakfast, and then he went back down to the dining room. After quickly getting dressed and running downstairs, they were again shocked to see that their teammate with the pink hair wasn't there. As Sasuke sat down, he asked, "Where is Sakura?" The copycat sighed and set down his empty coffee cup. He stared at them for a minute, trying to think of how to answer. As Tsunami stood there waiting for him to talk, she looked worried. She had just come into the room with the food. Naruto and Sasuke saw right away that her eyes were puffy. "I won't lie," said the slender man. "She's sick with something we can't identify. Last night, Tsunami and I both watched her after she began to spit up blood. Sakura has a high-grade fever and her eyes are bloodshot. There are a lot of other symptoms, but it would be those that are the more dominant ones." Naruto asked with a worried tone, "Then what are we going to do?" The man in the mask turned to the bridge builder and asked, "Tazuna, when will the bridge be done?" It took the old man a moment to think about it. "In about a week." Kakashi gave a nod. "I'm sorry to say this, but we're going to have to cut this mission short. All of us will be heading back once we pack all of our things. Right now, Sakura needs medical attention as soon as possible." "What?" yelled Inari from the other side of the table, but as if to say goodbye, the scarecrow said, "I'm sorry, but we have to leave. Naruto and Sasuke, start packing as soon as you finish breakfast." They both nodded and ate quickly so they could get ready to leave. Inari was sitting at the end of the table and looked sad. It was a lot earlier than he thought his fake big brother would leave. After 2 hours, Kakashi was seen riding Sakura on his back while Sasuke and Naruto stood next to him with their backpacks. A scarecrow was sure the Uchiha was looking at his sick teammate with worry every few seconds, even though he thought it was all in his head. "I guess this is goodbye," Tazuna said, his eyes sad. "You guys helped so much. I honestly don't know how to repay you, but for starters, I managed to get someone at the docks that'll give you a ride home." "Thank you very much," she said. Naruto looked at Inari, who was crying, and tried to figure out how to calm the boy down. During his time there, the little boy had become like a little brother. Inari said, "Sorry for crying," in between sniffles. "It's okay to cry, you know," Naruto said. He was about to cry, but that was the last thing he wanted. These days, he only cries liquid silver. "But you're going to make me cry." On the other hand, Sasuke kept looking at Sakura, and his normally calm face showed that he was worried. If he could call her that, his friend was breathing all over the place, and she was shaking every time she took a breath. His sensei told him that her cheeks were a deep shade of red, which means she had a very bad fever. They had to go now. "Can we please get going?" Sasuke asked with a smirk, wanting to move the show along faster. Team 7 started their long journey home after saying goodbye to Tsunami, Tazuna, and Inari for the last time. As he watched them turn around, Inari yelled, "I know what we should call the bridge." To get his family's attention. "We should call it the Great Naruto Bridge." The old bridge builder thought about the name for a while. He did want it to be named after him, but the blonde ninja gave his village new hope. Tazuna thought it was a good idea to name it afterwards Naruto. "Alright, why not? Today, the bridge shall be known as the Great Naruto Bridge. As soon as we land, we'll go at full speed to get back to Konoha before it gets dark," Kakashi told his awake students. "Right now, we can't waste time because we might lose Sakura." They both gave each other nods as they realized how bad things were. When the boys turned to look ahead, they saw their boat skim across the water at top speed. The fast speed across the water made the winds change direction all the time, and their hair would sometimes splash and shower them in a cool spray. They remembered that the wave country wasn't nearly as nice as it was now. Now that Gato was gone, they didn't have to be afraid to use the boat engine. Sakura lay in the middle of the boat and rested her head on Kakashi's backpack. Sasuke sat next to her the whole time, which was a surprise. Naruto would have said something about his teammates' strange behavior around Sakura, but he didn't want to make anyone mad right now because he didn't want to lose any pieces of his body. Team 7 saw the dock that led back to the real world. Kakashi quickly grabbed Sakura and her things as soon as the boat touched it, and then the ninja shot out of the boat and toward home. It made the man who was working on the motor whistle when he saw how fast they were going. Naruto and Sasuke had a hard time keeping up with their masked teacher on the run back to Konoha. This was mostly because the man was carrying someone. They didn't really have time to argue. Soon it would be dark, and everyone was eager to see the gates of Konoha and get Sakura to the hospital. Naruto was excited to see Iruka and eat his favorite food, but Sasuke had other ideas. He had to train because he wanted to stay ahead of Naruto in the race to get better weapons and avoid a repeat of their first fight. When the well-known wooden gates of the village hidden in the leaves were seen, everyone would have let out a sigh of relief if they weren't all going so fast. Telling someone that gate duty was dull would be like telling someone that Jiraiya was a normal pervert. It wasn't even close to true. No one liked their job. In fact, most shinobi did everything they could to avoid it. The Konoha Nin team coming their way was a blessing for the guards at the front gates. They would no longer be bored for at least a few minutes. "Open up," Kakashi told the gates as he and his team stopped in front of them. "Right now we don't have time to spare. One of my team is direly sick and needs medical attention ASAP." One of them gave a nod and quickly opened the gates, letting everyone see their house. Never before were they so happy to be able to see the village. Before Sasuke and Naruto could run away, their teacher stopped them. "Now, before you go off, I want you two to meet me by the usual spot tomorrow. And Naruto, you and I are going to have a private talk with Sandaime later as well." The two people on Team 7 confirmed this by nodding their heads. While Sasuke was with his sensei and blonde teammate, he couldn't help but wonder why they had to meet with the Hokage. That would make sense. Maybe it had something to do with Naruto's seal. After all, a bloodline limit didn't just appear out of the blue very often. But he kept his irritations hidden behind his usual mask of indifference, even though he still didn't know what it was. He yelled as he ran for his favorite ramen stand, "Okay, see you later, sensei. Make sure you tell us what's wrong with Sakura tomorrow." Kakashi and Sasuke, the last two members of Team 7, then went their separate ways to take care of their own business. Kakashi dropped Sakura off at the hospital and talked to Sarutobi, while Sasuke went to train. It was like the blonde had lived there his whole life. He even knew how to get there through the nearby sewer system because he had to use them once when a Chunin followed him around for a joke he played on them when he was younger. Fun times. He hadn't been home to play jokes on anyone lately, which was sad, but he was back and going to. His sixth sense took over, telling him that someone nearby owned Bloodline Limit. He stopped in the middle of a thought and a step. Naruto looked around and paid close attention to every face that came by as he searched for the person. As if by magic, he knew the person was heading in the general direction of his favorite ramen stand. He calmed down because he knew his sense would work better if she focused. Lucky you. It was dinner and a brand new Bloodline Limit all in one go. Right away, he ran toward the person, pushing people aside and getting some bad words in return. He didn't care that he was being rude to people. He had to copy a new limit, or at least get permission from the person to do so. The only thing he had to do was find out who owned the limit and what it did. When he got to Ichiraku's, he finally saw where the signature came from. Without his goggles, his eyes would have popped out of their sockets. They had a bowl of ramen in front of them and were sitting at the counter. From a mile away, Naruto could tell who had that pineapple in their hair. It was actually Amino Iruka, who was eating his favorite food. The man woke up and turned around to see his shocked student. "Hey Naruto. Welcome back." Iruka's friendly smile turned into a puzzled look when he saw Naruto's shocked face. The water goggles were another new thing that Naruto's surrogate brother was wearing. Naruto's eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he fell backwards. This was something Iruka never thought would happen. As shocked as if someone had told him that make out paradise was off. Sarutobi sat behind his desk and stared at the masked Hatake with wide eyes. His pipe was smoking while it rested in his mouth, and the room had a faint smell of burned tobacco. In the middle of Kakashi's story about the Kyokugen, Sarutobi had to get his pipe out to calm down. Naruto was the world's most unpredictable ninja because he could do anything and had a very strong bloodline limit. Through the copying of limits. This gave the blonde an endless number of options. Shinobi countries would even go to war to get this prize. The old man asked, "Kakashi, do you know what this means?" The scarecrow said, "I have a vague idea." "Yes, I think you do," the Sandame said next. This puts Naruto on a pedestal much higher than even Sasuke. So much so that we can't even tell the council about this. The Kyokugen is just too valuable to let anyone know about it unless it's absolutely necessary. Kakashi agreed and said, "I know. Naruto's bloodline limit is so valuable that any nation would go to war just to claim it. I can see why you wouldn't want to tell the council, though. The moment any of them finds out, they might try to marry off Naruto. Inoichi would probably be the first to make a run for it too." "I would agree," the elder stated, "but the elders wouldn't be the only ones to pull such a stunt. Some of the friendlier nations might make an attempt at gaining the Kyokugen by such means. Either way, I'm glad you've kept it secret, and I'm proud of Naruto for actually using his brain by wearing those goggles." The copycat laughed. "Yes, he's much smarter than even I originally assumed. He did use some good strategy during his fight against Sakura and Sasuke. As a matter of fact, he would have won had I not interfered, but I felt my students' lives were more important." Once more, Sarutobi leaned back in his chair and thought about what the Kyokugen might be like. The Kyokugen was so much more than that. How did it come to be? It had to have something to do with Rin'negan, but if it did, then... "Kakashi," the man said, looking at the old man as the Sandame spoke in a serious voice. "The Kyokugen isn't a Dojutsu." The thin man asked with a single eye slightly wider in shock, "What? How is that possible?" The Hokage shook his head back and forth in his chair for a moment to clear his mind. The Kyokugen isn't just a Dojutsu, despite how it shows in Naruto's eyes. The Dojutsu is just a small part of the limit as a whole. What we are dealing with here is a transcendent bloodline limit, much like the legendary 6 Way Eyes, the Rin'negan. What do you mean? It was only briefly that Kakashi heard of the Rin'negan. Even though the founder of the ninja world is said to have used the Rin'negan, Kakashi didn't know much else about what it could do. "From the details I've gathered about the Rin'negan," said the Sandame, "it wasn't limited to the eyes. The users also had access to all 6 forms of chakra, along with a whole arsenal of other abilities. Thus, it was something more than just a Dojutsu. Most limits are usually classified as anatomy manipulation, by element, or as Dojutsu, but the Rin'negan and Kyokugen are all 3, making them transcendent bloodline limits." The masked Junin asked, "If this is true, then how does this make the Kyokugen one of these limits?" "Easy. Naruto's chakra is neutral, but it can change into any shape it needs," Sarutobi said as he snapped his fingers. "Then there is the body manipulation that occurs whenever he changes limits. That's another. Finally, there is the Dojutsu, which is the mark of the Kyokugen as a whole and the necessary key used to copy the limits themselves." For a split second, Kakashi stood still as he took it all in. Then he leaned back in his chair and shook his head while closing one eye. This was getting way too hard for him to handle. He should thank Naruto for making his life so hard. The jerk just had to learn a stupid but useful limit. Where was the fun in that? On the other hand, Kakashi learned from the Sandame how important Naruto's limit really was. There was no doubt that the Kyokugen was something worth fighting for if it was as great as the Hokage said it was. The man with silver hair thought to himself, "It's strange that the person everyone hates has the one thing everyone would want the most. It's more ironic than anything." That old man smiled and quickly turned his face serious. "It is, isn't it? But now we have to protect Naruto from everyone that would try to steal his limit. Until we can discuss this some more with Naruto, you're dismissed, but do not so much as breath a word of this to anyone." Kakashi said yes and then went to see his student with pink hair, leaving the Sandame to think. He needed to know about Kushina and Minato. Maybe he could learn something about their family trees and see if they had any strange genes. But there was a problem. The files were deleted to protect Naruto. This meant that only people who knew the late Yondaime and his wife would ever know their names. Sarutobi had to find one of those friends, and he didn't think Hiyashi would know that Naruto was his godson. He needed someone like Jiraiya who knew them well, had been close to them, and wouldn't tell anyone any secrets they had. On top of that, the pervert with white hair hadn't even met his grandson yet. Sarutobi told his secretary, "You have 3 minutes to get me the best hunter. Nin team out there." He did this by pressing his finger against the intercom on his desk. She quickly yelled back, "Yes, sir." A nurse at the hospital was looking from a sheet of paper to the pinkette sleeping quietly and shaking her head in disbelief. Someone behind her asked, "Is she okay?" She turned around and almost hit the new person with her hand. It was a Junin, the nurse saw. The person was wearing a mask, and only one eye could be seen. In no time at all, she knew he was the legendary Kakashi, copy. Cat, Hitaki. Well? He asked with hopes. He was scared because he saw the woman looking at his student with wonder in her eyes. Kakashi only hoped it wasn't something dangerous. The nurse shook her head to clear her mind. Well, we stabilized her, and she's going to be fine. Her symptoms were similar to those of a severe allergic reaction, but... The nurse with dark hair pursed her lips as she thought about what to say about this. Medical oddity. What she saw in the blood samples of this girl was just so. That's strange. A lot of what she read about strange medical things wasn't as good as what the blood samples told her. But... Kakashi pushed him quickly. She tried her best to find the words. What makes this so unusual is what caused the reaction. We took some blood samples earlier, but, well, just look. Jinin with silver hair was given the paper she was holding so he could take a look at himself. But to him, it was just a bunch of letters and numbers, and he felt stupid because he couldn't read what he was saying. When the nurse explained, he was quickly clear. The top row of numbers and letters, she explained, is her original DNA sequence. Her original DNA sample marked her as a normal person. No bells, no whistles. But that second sequence below the first one, it marks her as having a bloodline limit. Something almost came out of Kakashi's one eye. After the bombshell hit him, he thought about it for a minute that seemed like forever. What the hell did Sakura do to get her own limit when no one in her family has ever been a shinobi? But this is what's weird, the woman said as she put her hand to her chin. That third sequence is foreign DNA that we were able to separate. It was that made her allergic. I might not be going too far when I say that may have given her the bloodline limit. In the history of medicine, this has never happened before. DNA doesn't just change. The scarecrow looked at the paper with wide eyes. He must have been having a bad joke or a very strange dream that he couldn't wake up from. The nurse said that Sakura had to touch someone's blood for what she said to be true. The thing was, she didn't. He took a break. It had only been 1 day since her fight with Naruto. A vivid memory came back to Kakashi as she saw herself cutting Naruto on the hand and then getting blood in her eyes. He asked in a way that made the nurse take a step back in fear, "What kind of limit are we talking about here?" In order to take her mind off of what was going on, she cleared her throat for a moment. When I looked at her, I saw that her eyes and body were the same, but her chakra was different. Her body makes 2 kinds of elemental chakra on its own, which means we may have an elementally based bloodline limit on our hands. For a few seconds, Kakashi looked at Sakura's sleeping form and thought about what to do. It had to be Naruto's blood, but how could it be? He had to see Hokage Sama right away if it was because of the blood of his blonde student. He said in a dangerous way, "Listen, and listen carefully. I'm going to get Hokage Sama. There is no way you can leave this room until I return. You also won't say anything to anyone who comes in. Do you understand?" She quickly nodded her head, and she could feel the killer intent in the air. Before he could figure out what was going on, Hitaki Kakashi made it clear that this was something that had to be kept secret. He quickly ran to the Hokage and left the nurse to wait in a chair. In one thing, she was clear, she was badly lost. "Now make sure that when you find him, you tell him that we're opening a new bathhouse and we're going to name it after him in his honor and that he should be here for the grand opening," told the Hokage. "If you don't tell him this, you'd have to knock him unconscious to bring him back, and that isn't something that'll work." The men in the squad of Hunter.
Nin just laughed, but the only woman in the group was very angry and only 3 seconds away from trying to castrate every man within a block.
Sarutobi would have given them another reason, especially since he could feel the woman's desire to kill coming through, but Jiraiya wasn't going to go away unless there was a naked woman and a lot of sake involved. Just as Kakashi was about to send the group off, he slammed the doors to the room wide open, making it look like he had run at full speed without stopping. He told the group of masked ninja, "You are fired. Don't come back until you have him." As soon as they left, Kakashi told them he was worried. "Hokage Sama, you need to come with me. Is something wrong? It may have something to do with the Kyokugen. And if it does, then we are seriously going to have our hands full." As soon as Sarutobi heard the word Kyokugen, he got up and followed the masked assassin back to the hospital. The nurse at the hospital was getting bored, but she jumped up as soon as the door opened and the Sandame walked in. "Would you mind telling me your name?" he wanted to know. It's Hikari, sir," she begged. "Could you please hand me that blood sample sheet you showed Kakashi when he came here?" The man in question came in from behind while the door was being closed. She gave him the paper quickly after nodding her head. His old eyes looked over the paper for a moment before he turned to look at her. When he spoke, he meant business. "What you've seen today will be an class secret from everyone. Treat Sakura here as if she was a normal patient and destroy all of her blood samples and any evidence that she has a bloodline limit for the moment." "This is pretty bad, right?" she asked with worry. "You think?" the old man asked in a sarcastic tone. "I'll get to it." Hikari squeaked as she ran out of the room, making it sound like the Shinigami was after her. "As for you, Kakashi," Sarutobi told the man in the mask, "it looks like our original conversation will have to continue back at my office." It was after 10 o'clock, and Sasuke could be seen walking home from the place where his team likes to train. He felt like someone was pushing him to get stronger for one of the few times in his life. This person also became his rival, and if he was too lazy, his blonde teammate would pass him in terms of power. Surely that is not okay. He wasn't going to let the very last person get ahead of him. Not ever, ever. He began to think about other things along the way. You could have told him 2 days ago that he would be worried about Sakura, and he would have punched the person in the face and told them to stop being so crazy. But now he was taking care of her stress. She showed him a new side when he trained her the night before their fight with Naruto. She had more. He just couldn't explain it. If she was stronger and less of a fangirl, he might have seen her sooner. She only needed a little help getting where she needed to go. He was thinking when he saw the Yanamaka family's flower shop. He could be nice and bring her flowers while she's in the hospital. She shrugged her shoulders and walked into the shop. He didn't remember that a certain blonde lived there. When he walked in and saw the platinum blonde cleaning the counters, he felt bad about what he had done. When she looked up and saw the boy with the dark hair, she almost squealed with joy. With tears in her eyes, she asked, "What could I do for you, Sasuke?" "Kun?" The boy stepped back and then cleared his throat. "I need flowers for someone." "Wow, really? Are they for me?" Sasuke moved back a little more. No. He just told her, "I need them taken to the hospital." As she went about her work, she looked a little sad. She also knew that her dad would be very angry if he found out that she scared a customer away. He would hit her hard. "Alright, what would you like?" She said it with a tone of giving up. Because he knew the girl wouldn't be attached to him in any way in the next few minutes, Sasuke let out a sigh of relief. It might have been smart to get to know Sakura better. Then the fangirls might stop chasing him. What kind of flower arrangement could I get with this? After that, he showed her some of the cash he was carrying at the time, which made the girl raise an eyebrow. "That should get you a pretty big one. Who could this be for?" she asked, her voice full of genuine interest. "Just deliver it to this person." He grabbed a nearby card, wrote down the name of the person he wanted her to give it to, and quickly left the building. As soon as the Uchiha was gone, she quickly grabbed the card and almost dropped it when she saw that it was Saburo. He slowly opened his eyes and sat up, but he wasn't in his own house. It took him a while to figure out that he was at Iruka's house and sitting on the couch in the living room. "About time you got up," Iruka told her as he walked in. "More or less, I'm curious to know what caused you to black out on me." Naruto raised his hand, pointed his finger at him, and stared at him in shock. He finally yelled what was bothering him, "You have a bloodline limit." For a few seconds, Iruka just blinked at his student and looked at Naruto as if he had two heads. He asked, "What makes you think that? Don't tell me lies." The blonde kept pointing the finger at his former teacher and yelling, "I can feel it." Iruka let out a sigh and said, "Naruto, I don't have a bloodline limit. I'm willing to bet 10 bowls of ramen you do." The teacher did nothing but smile and nod his head. "Okay, how about you try to prove it?" That was the wrong thing for him to say because it made Naruto want to do it. The blonde got up quickly and was about to take off the goggles when he remembered that he was doing everything he could to hide his eyes. But Naruto thought he could trust his teacher in Konoha. You wouldn't mind keeping a secret, would you?" he asked with a sheepish smirk on his face. "Of course," said his teacher. He took off his glasses with a sly smile on his face and showed Iruka his pupils, which looked like mirrors. The man's eyes got bigger, and he couldn't help but stare at the eyes in shock. One that he had never seen or heard of was had by his favorite student. "Naruto, is that a bloodline limit?" That's what Iruka asked, totally confused. The blonde who was Konoha's worst enemy bobbed his head back and forth. His sly grin got even bigger. This was the person Naruto could trust the most, and he was sure the teacher wouldn't say anything. "Yep." He was excited and said, "I call it Kyokugen. Do you know what it does?" He rubbed the back of his head. "Well, all I have to do is look at someone who has another limit and copy it. Also, I can feel people with limits, like you." He said the last part while pointing again at his teacher. Iruka only blinked again, then smiled in a funny way. He was next to rub the back of his head. "I didn't think anyone would find out," he said, feeling a little embarrassed and amused at the same time. "Ha. I already knew." Naruto smiled like he had won. "Wait a minute," Iruka said with a worried smile. "Naruto, did you say that you can copy other bloodline limits?" "Yep. The Sharingan, Hyouten, and Byaku chakra have already been copied." The teacher couldn't believe what he saw in his former student. He had never heard of a bloodline limit like that, but he did agree with Kakashi about one thing: Naruto was the most unpredictable person in the world. "So, why did you tell me you didn't have a limit?" Iruka was thinking when he looked up and saw that Naruto had a very strange look on his face. He let out a sigh as he got ready to talk. "Well, I've tried to keep a lot of things about myself a secret from you. First, I do have a bloodline limit. Second, my rank is Chunin, but my skills make me a low S class." It was like a rock hit Naruto in the mouth when he heard that his old teacher was a Kage level ninja. But if that were true, he should have hit Mizuki that night. You can't be that strong. It's possible that you could have severely hurt Mizuki. Then why didn't you? He asked with a frown, but his teacher laughed in a way that caught him off guard. "Well, I believed in you," his teacher told him. "When you told me you learned a move from the Forbidden Scroll, I knew you wouldn't let Mizuki win that night. In order to find out what it was, I behaved like a normal Chunin that night." Naruto stared at him because he didn't know what to say to yell at him. When they were fighting, his teacher thought a lot like Kakashi. And on top of that, Iruka put so much faith in him that he behaved less normally and trusted his student with his life. That night, he was sure he could beat Mizuki. Naruto began, but he still didn't know what to say. That's how much Iruka trusted him. "It's okay, not many people know this outside of Hokage Sama. Here's a question. If you're so good, then why do you teach?" the blonde asked, scratching his head to make sense of it. All Iruka did was smile again. "I love being a teacher. It's not that I don't like working at the academy. I have done a few high-level missions. There is a lot more peace and quiet, but you and Konohamaru kind of ruin it. Do you wish you had paid more attention in class now?"
"Yeah, I guess so," Naruto said with another frown.
His old teacher asked him, "Now, why do you call it Kyokugen?" With a smile that was much calmer than his usual ones, Naruto talked about what he had done in the country of Wave. He sat down and told the whole story, including all of his encounters with Zabuza, which made Iruka very angry. The blonde got emotional when talking about Haku because he still felt close to the boy. He also talked about how the Hyouten user gave him the idea for the name of his Dojutsu. "That's quite a story, Naruto," Iruka said with a smile, thanking Haku in private for the small part he had played in the life of his favorite student.
If it wasn't for you showing me your eyes, I would be hard-pressed to believe everything. Yeah, well, I've been trying to keep it a secret, Naruto pouted. He really wanted to show it off to everyone in the village, but he could understand why Kakashi would want to protect it. Hey, do you think I could please copy your limit? Iruka shook his head at the boy who was smiling and kissed and turned the smirk into an angry pout. To fit the picture, Naruto crossed his arms and twitched his eyes to show that he was mad. If there were any girls nearby, they might have thought it was cute, like a teddy bear that was mad. His teacher told him, "Sorry, Naruto, but I don't think the people nearby would be thankful for a blackout." This made Naruto turn his attention back to the older person. For the same reason as Haku, my parents lived through the blood cleansings in Kiri. It was a bad thing that my parents were visiting old friends when it started. I was very young at the time, maybe 2 or 3 years old. Because of that, I now live here in Konoha. You were just like Haku? Naruto asked out of genuine interest. Iruka gave him a nod before he went on. I was. What does your limit do? Well, the scarred teacher began, it's called Hyakurai, which means 1000 thunderclaps. I can control my bioelectricity and make it strong enough that lightning could strike me and not hurt me. This is my bloodline limit. I'm now so good at lightning jutsu that I can do some of the strongest moves with just one hand. I also think and react much more quickly. When I caught all those erasers and buckets of water, did you ever wonder why? Put your finger to your chin and think, that does explain it. Iruka was right when she said that pranks where people tried to hit the man with something like erasers always failed. Naruto also lost his cool a few times and tried to hit his teacher over the head with a blunted kunai, but the teacher caught him with his fingertips while keeping his eyes on the blackboard. Also, I can sense bioelectricity, and because everyone's signature is different, I can track people down, he smiled and continued. In an accusatory tone, Naruto yelled at his teacher, that's why you always found me when I pulled a prank. The teacher laughed. Yeah, well, there were a couple of times that I let you escape, mainly because I didn't want to follow you into the sewers. While Naruto's head was cooking, someone with an egg on them could have cooked it on top of it. His teacher could have always caught him, but he only let him get away a few times when he was really desperate and crawled into the sewers. How awful it all is. Now as fancy as those abilities are, they're not the main ones, the blonde said, snapping out of his tense mood as he stared at the man and watched Iruka. Allow me to demonstrate the most powerful ability of Hyakurai. Iruka walked over to a nearby outlet and put his finger on it. This made all the lights in the house flash on and off. He showed Naruto again by putting his fingers together and making a small arc of electricity dance between them as he walked back to him. As you can see, I control real lightning, not that fake chakra lightning you see many ninja use. What's the difference? Naruto asked, his eyes still wide from the shows. There are a lot of them, but unfortunately, it's getting too late for me to explain, and you need to head to bed. The blonde tried to say something, but Iruka cut him off. Come on, you need to work out anyway. When we get away from people tomorrow, I'll let you copy it, mostly because we don't want the power grid to go down. I've had this happen before, and it was pretty embarrassing when they finally found out it was me. The blonde said, fine, crossed his arms, and walked off to his apartment. He just shook his head and shut the door. Sarutobi was thinking deeply as he sat behind his desk and stroked his beard. Kakashi sat across from him and kept quiet while he waited for his commander to speak. To begin with, the old man finally said. It looks like we have another limit on our hands. But what worries me is how Sakura got this bloodline limit. Kakashi explained his idea. It must have had something to do with the Kyokugen. You saw the blood test results, and if you remember correctly from my debriefing about our mission, Sakura managed to come into contact with Naruto's blood. For a second, Sarutobi did nothing but sit there and try to figure out how this could be possible. He did think about why, though. If that was the case, Naruto would be in a lot more trouble than he was already in, which said something about how useful his Kyokugen was. I think we have found the counterpart to the Rin'negan. In order to listen, Kakashi cocked his head. We are looking at one of the 3 great Dojutsu. It is the one that made bloodline limits possible. This is the source of all bloodline limits, just like the Rin'negan was the source of ninjutsu. The copycat said out loud, but that means we have to keep people away from Naruto's blood. Otherwise, a lot of limits would show up out of the blue. We don't need that much attention.
Sarutobi said with worry, we should also be thankful that Sakura didn't come into contact with anything else. What would that be? If it was dangerous enough for her to have medical attention after just coming into contact with Naruto's blood, said the old man, imagine what would have happened if she came into contact with it while he was using the Kyuubi's chakra. As he thought about it, Kakashi leaned back in his chair. Some people thought the fox's chakra was dangerous, but if it touched someone through this blood transfer thing, that person would die very quickly and painfully. It was kind of like a safety measure for Naruto's blood in case anyone got it on them. The fox didn't seem to want other people to know about this limit. So, what do we do? Asked the man in the mask. Sarutobi started to stroke his beard again. Right now, we're not saying anything. That's all there is to it. We should be fine as long as no one finds out. You'll keep this limit a secret. The Hitaki nodded to show that he knew what to do. Everything just had to be quiet right now. Now, I think it's almost midnight, and you still haven't rested from your mission. Tomorrow, you should bring Naruto to my office so that we can talk to him. But we're going to keep this little secret about the Kyokugen. Kakashi said, yes, and then he quietly went home to rest before meeting up with his team.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.